something you experience, something newsworthy, something that you've been thinking on. And here we have a topic. Actually, should we have more argumentation in our conferences?
Yeah.
And you even have the concept of the death match. What you're thinking here? I mean, that's a great opening topic to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I like it. Sure. And we had on SVT, the Swedish television, on a program called, I think, The Game. It's called Matchen in Sweden. Do you understand any Swedish, or is it?
No.
Oh, okay. Anyway.
But I understand Matchen.
Yes.
We had one of our guests at the podcast participated in this TV show. And please.
Yeah. Part of my idea is inspired by traveling in Europe and seeing that in Europe outside the UK, there is still evening talk shows, especially in France, but also in the Nordics, where people are debating issues of the day.
But tell the story around here.
I think in that case, they produced that show really poorly, I think, and it came out really bad. So I do agree with you that if you look at the two extremes, you can have people just patting their backs all the time and agreeing each other, and there's no debate and discussion at all, and that's really boring and not really fulfilling in any way. And then you can have the opposite of people that completely disagree and are not even trying to find some kind of consensus, and they're just rather trying to fight the other person rather than even trying to have a constructive discussion. And I think both are bad. Right? Yep. In that case, for SVT, they basically had a person that was against AI, saying, AI doesn't work, it doesn't understand anything, blah, blah, blah. And then a person that did the opposite. And then that person, that just turned into...
malicious,
Yeah, I mean, they just became really defensive, both of them, trying to talk all the time and just trying to prove each other wrong. And that's not a very constructive and useful kind of discussion. And especially since they recorded the show for like 2 hours, and then they later edited out like 20 minutes or something. And they just took the parts that were, most hateful or something.
Okay, so the 20 minutes of consensus got cut.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically they really... I mean, like they did the classical editing for the reality show. We want as much fighting and drama. They were cutting for drama and not for content.
Yeah. So part of applying this to conferences and conferences in the data space is to maybe create a little more drama. So I agree that putting direct competitors on stage and forcing them into some kind of death match, it might be fun.
Do you have any people that you follow on the AI stage, like Gary Marcus or Jan LeCun or someone like that?
No. I'm not a big AI thinker or doer. I'm just a applier of those great things that they do.
Otherwise, they are two extremes, I can tell you.
Yes,
and
okay.
They are on each other's camps, and they argue a lot on Twitter.
Or the Jeffrey Hinton versus the other side of that debate about what is the structure of the brain. Yeah. And I think it's
Chomsky or something. And Chomsky is this kind of 94-year-old guy that doesn't believe that AI can understand anything about language. And that,
But his model of language is a tree-based model?
Yeah, it's more or less, yes.
Yeah.
Of course, doesn't work, but he is also a very knowledgeable person, and he's a lot into politics and whatnot.
Yeah.
But then when he comes in, he's 94 years old. I mean, he doesn't... Yeah, he's not up to latest technology advances that we have seen, and that's kind of sad. Anyway,
but what if we on the show here brainstorm for how could we do let's frame it as the debating club or the death match at the next data innovation. Debate club is so we're going to have something we call the debate club at next Data Innovation Summit conference.
Yep,
how would we frame that, or how would we do that? What's your ideas here? What would be a very... Why do we need a debate like that? Why do we need it? And how can we go about it so we don't end up in, as you said, the sales extreme that we are debating used to sell whatever comes out of the air. Or we are debating as, drama and enemies, and there's no constructive debate. Yeah. So how do we, what's the sweet spot here? And how would you, you said you pitched it even sometimes for an internal conference.
Yeah.
Now, what's your vision here?
So it's a little bit spicy for a vendor to do in their own vendor conference. But one day I'm going to wear them down. One day I'm going to win.
I love that idea to bring it right home at the vendor.
But you
HQ.
might have to pioneer it for us.
Yeah. I come in and facilitate it, no problem.
But when I'm speaking to any audience or thinking about, a conference, to me, it's important that people feel that they had a show, that they observed something interesting, that they took time out of their day, and that they learned something, but that, by entertaining someone, you open their mind, you open a crack where you can put in another message. And that's part of what selling is, but it's also part of, it's a requirement for learning. So I think a little bit of drama, a little bit of emotion, a little bit of disagreement would just shake people out of their complacency, out of their assumptions, make them think differently. And so the way I would do it at the Data Innovation Summit Debate Club 2023, you take an issue that is a bit polarizing, centralization versus decentralization.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Data mesh, data warehouse, streaming batch, anything.
Streaming versus batch.
Any one of these long-running things that, goes away, comes back the next decade with a new name, goes away, comes back. Yeah. Any of those, I think, to both increase the drama and to reduce the potential for kind of reality TV fisticuffs, you should make well-known proponents of one side argue the other side. So if you are deathly against decentralization of data because then people in business domains will make the wrong decisions, or if you're against citizen data science or whatever you call it because people need training before they use data to make decisions, if you put people in the other seat.
You mean basically taking one who's normally a decentralized guy and have them
argue the other case.
That's fun.
And that's just
steel manning, right? So you have straw manning and steel manning. So if you do steel manning, then you have to argue the other person, your debater's arguments.
Yep.
And I think it's a really good way to.
But you're doing it, what you yourself in their shoes would throw at you. But also you have to understand and maybe find the reason that they actually believe a different thing. And part of this might be completely informed by in primary school and high school, being in debate club and being given argue for and against nuclear power in New Zealand.
And have you done that?
Yeah. Argue for and against every contentious issue.
Have you been part of some debate club? Or?
Yeah, well, it was part of the school I was in. Not in any competitive setting.
We have had this, you always come back, Anders, to say, why don't we have communication skill and rhetorics much more deep in the Swedish curricula? Why aren't we educating ourselves to be able to do this? And the typical point of the debate club in school and stuff like that, or even speech that you have in many Anglo-Saxon countries. We don't have that so much.
Really?
We have it a little bit, but not at all to the same extent. So use an example. Did you ever go have a debate club in school, in primary school? Of course not. And of course you did.
Is that because conflict is bad here, or
you know what? I don't know. You know what? The country of neutrality. Don't debate. No. I don't know. We don't, or maybe we haven't understood how important communication and rhetorics is in our culture. I think it's much more highly valued. If I use take in America, to be the entrepreneur, to go and get stuff.
Yeah.
But I would even go further and say, I think one of the most powerful skills a person can gain is the skill of communication. That's certainly something that I look for when I have interviews with people. And if people are able to communicate in an efficient way, but also very, very structured way to be able to explain what they're thinking and also listen to the other person so they actually do the ABC kind of rhetoric skills. That is something that's really impressive. Then I know that is a person that can actually have a very positive influence on a company or an organization. It's also like, I remember I don't recall the name of the person, but he was a really senior developer and it was a podcast and they asked him the question, what is the most powerful developer? What type of developer skill are you looking for? Can you just give an example of throughout your history and your 40 years of doing development, who was the most powerful developer. And they were expecting him to say, I remember this person. He was an expert in every kind of database you can think of, or this type of back-end technology, or this kind of, front-end, whatever. But no, what he said was, no. The people that I think is the most valuable for any company in terms of type of developer is the one that can communicate. And that really struck me and really well. And it's something that still I think is really, really important skill. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate that we don't teach that in school properly. And
I owe you a beer.
And I'm glad to hear it. But was it in New Zealand that you...
Yes, it's really interesting because a lot of New Zealand educators really look up to Nordic countries' systems. Why can't we be more like them?
Yeah, interesting.
So we have other good sides, but I think this is a weak point that we do have, though.
So I would argue this is interesting because right now in the Nordics, many are looking up to the Finnish education system, which is actually moving slightly different to, this is primary school, right? In terms of how they understand the core ideology of how do we get...
What is education?
What is education? How do we get people to learn, and how do we get people or children motivated to learn? Where I think they are on a slightly different path than Sweden right now. And then we have our strength, but we have some gaps. That's what we are highlighting here, that you have some stuff that I think, how come there is no debate clubs in the Swedish schools? And someone would then argue, of course we have it and we do it. And this is by school. They have some cool project, but it's not as clear. You get a grade in speech, you get a grade in presentation skills. Not at all.
It was critical for me because when I did it back then, it was absolutely terrifying. I'm an introvert by nature, in case you couldn't guess. As a data scientist, many of us are, and it was terrifying when you knew 4 times a year, 6 times a year, it would be speaking in front of the class time, and I couldn't do it impromptu at the time, so I would do it with a script, and then that's even worse because you're reading a script and people are bored and there's no show, there's no drama, there's no one's listening because their mind is not being opened. But I did it so much, and being a musician is what allowed me to eventually transfer. Friend of the show, guest of the long-time listener, first-time caller, and I should mention that I'm a musician just because they're overrepresented.
To continue proving the correlation here.
Yeah, so the better I got performing and being basically ready to fail on stage playing music, the more comfortable I got speaking. But beyond the physical skill and the controlling your nerves and finding what to say, the debate club thing of I could be on either side of this debate. So I actually need to know both sides, and I need to know them in such a depth that I can maneuver around the arguments of the others. On some level, it's quite facile and it can feel fake. But it teaches you some flexibility. It teaches you some ability to communicate. And when I was hiring data scientists, communication was the main thing.
So how do you evaluate communication skills? If you do an interview with some data scientist, how do you evaluate their communication skills?
There's a very easy first slice or pass that you can make, which is, can you share with me anything you've recorded or written or created? Yes. And a lot of people who make it past the first CV cut, when you try to have them communicate something that they've worked on, either in the moment, or better still, it's great to have them describe it in the moment in the interview, but also to point you to external evidence.
I mean, like showing them, I did this talk at the Innovation Summit 5 years ago. Have a look at that.
Yeah, and it can be 5 years ago. It doesn't matter. And I'm trying to hire a member of my team, a German-speaking member of my team in Germany right now. And a lot of people who are applying, I say, well, you applied for a job called AI evangelist. So we expect certain things. And one of those is to be able to go on a stage, not fall off it, put on some kind of show, communicate something, and to also be able to do that in a written form. And it's surprising how many
fall off.
Yeah, very. Yeah. No, if they fell off and they still shared the video, I would know that they're learning. It's when there's no data, missing data, and it's...
So what you're highlighting is that someone is applying in an evangelist role, but they don't have any evangelist track record.
Yes.
Basically.
Or they do, but it's secret. Or, I only did it in my company or something. And so I say, well, if you progress through the process, we can manufacture, simulate that kind of thing. But,
I'm not going to hire you until I've seen you rock on stage.
Exactly. And I got my job at Dataiku by walking off a Dataiku conference stage. Mm-hmm. And then 2 French guys said, "We love your British accent. So can you help explain things to people?" I said, "What's the job?" They said, "We don't know. We're working it out." But I was not a Dataiku customer before working there. It was that I presented a different point of view to some of the other conference guests.
Interesting, yeah. And you're nailing home how important that is, and it's really interesting to even hear you now in a recruitment process. It's even funny, evangelist role. that really puts a pressure on communication, I would argue.
Yeah, and you need to be good. It's in the name.
I mean, I think also, one thing I really like what you said about how to evaluate a data science role or AI evangelist kind of role, and having them trying to explain something they done or similar. But I think there is an additional point to that, which is if you ask them to explain something a bit complicated or the most complicated thing that they can think about, and they have to do that in a very short period of time.
Yep.
And explain it to someone that doesn't know that topic, and they're still able to do it in a short period of time, efficiently, and it's something complicated, then I'm really, really pleased.
That would be the second test. I would ask people, I would say something very basic, like, okay, you have 2 explanations for some phenomena that has been observed, and you don't know which one is the better explanation. How would you explain the process that you follow to go around that? It's just explain the scientific method to me. And a lot of people who had masters in statistics and applying for data scientist jobs in 2017, 2018 couldn't explain it clearly. And I would, they would try, and I'd say, okay, now explain it as if I'm my grandma, my late grandmother. No offense to her, but she wasn't a data scientist. And so when she would ask me over the years, what are you doing? What are you doing? What is your job? What is your job? She passed away before I came in AI evangelist. That would have been
that would be interesting.
Next level.
But we're taking the bar test into the grandma test.
Yeah.
Can you converse so your grandma follows?
And ultimately, until you can boil things down that much, and the reason it's important in my job is, this morning I was with a potential future customer of Dataiku, and the CEO was there for the first hour by choice. He could have been elsewhere. And unless I can engage in a conversation that's actually on that person's terms and turn what I know into something they can digest, and I can do that in real time, I'm not doing my job. My job is to speak to that person and to convey what might be possible with AI. And if I talk about any big words that are my jargon but not their jargon, they'll switch off, as they should. And it's an interesting point to be in the hype cycle where that is the most important skill.
Yeah. But switching now back to where we started, why would the debate as a format be valuable in a data innovation conference? And we can be positive around this, but we can also be cynical in what we are seeing and what we're not getting to in the current state, so to speak.
So cynical, cutting through vendor noise.
Yeah.
Okay, easy. The positive reason to do it is there are consequential decisions to make, right? Everyone now at every conference says, build for value, don't go for the hardest use cases, bring the business along. The funny thing is when you go to a CDO roundtable, it's the same lessons being shared over and over again, and not a lot of practical, like, what do I do tomorrow with that? So there are very real choices and trade-offs. And so how much you decentralize or centralize, which kind of data, in which ways, there's not a black and white answer. So people really need to understand that. And seeing a debate where, especially if people argue the opposite side, maybe maybe this isn't such a religious conflict overall.
But
it forces them to make a choice.
And that resonates with me, because I think there is ideas how it should be. And then in reality, most of us who is working in more traditional companies are working in a context, 100-year depth in process, 50-year tech depth. We are working in a cultural setting which is hierarchical or super decentralized.
Yeah.
We're working in an environment where sometimes the money is out in the node and sometimes the money is central. So there are all these different dimensions that you need to navigate, which means in the end, the argument for the debate is that what can we give to the audience, the delegates, that allows us to build their point of view,
Yes.
in order for them to navigate with their point of view in the context that no one else knows.
Navigate that same discussion that they need to have internally
Yes.
with their stakeholders, with their people.
Because
with
they
their
need to
teams.
know the pros and cons of central versus decentralized and how that would apply in their particular context.
We don't know the answer to that a priori.
Yeah,
everyone has, well, I did it in this one place or in two places.
And I think a debate where you then understand what are principles and patterns here and what are tactics and what are sort of working. So you get to the point, you are debating for this centralized view now. What is the context around that? You say that argument, but is that argument true in all circumstances? Or when has that proven to be right? And when has it not? And then, of course, if you're very strong on one side of the debate, you have all these things stacked up, and you have the storytelling, you have the requirements, you have the different perspective that backs that up. But you're kind of thin on the other area. And the other guy has, of course, the opposite. Now, if I give you both, that means, okay, now I can navigate. Where is my company in this? So I think the debate, very interesting.
And I'll volunteer myself right now. So I used to be very elitist about data because I'd worked with it a lot. And I had qualifications and experience across domains, and I had told people how they were wrong. And then I realized that that's a difficult way to live and a difficult way to create value. And until you go to people and help them go on their journey, you're not being very, very useful. So it'd be very interesting to force me to argue, to be like I used to be an elitist. Also because I now work for Dataiku, to force me to argue that data science AI should be the preserve of an elite few. That would be a tricky mental exercise for me, but it would make me stronger when I need to go and argue the other thing, which is what I believe more today. But there are cases in every company, in every context, where particular expertise is required.
I think that's a really good point. If you train yourself to steelman other people's arguments, it makes you stronger yourself in your own conviction in some way.
Or not.
Potentially.
Or not.
Potentially.
It might.
Anyway, improve your view of the world in some sense.
You have a more robust worldview, world model if you have confronted the ways yours might be wrong.
And the citizen data scientist, I think, is an awesome topic, of course, that we should cover shortly as well.
Yeah, but should we introduce Shaun properly? You want to?
Yes, I can do that. And very welcome here, Shaun McGirr.
Thank you.
How do you pronounce your last name? McGirr?
McGirr?
McGirr.
Everyone outside the UK says it the way I say it.
Yeah, okay.
In the UK, the country closest to Ireland, you get every other pronunciation.
Really? McGirr.
McGirr, Maguire. And just
McGirr.
No, but we haven't met before, but I met people from Dataiku quite a lot, and I met some of the founders as well at some point. Who was it? Thomas, I believe, and Florian or something. Yeah. This is back in the Spotify days, but it's awesome to have a representative of Dataiku here, because I think it's a very awesome data science toolkit and product that we have. So I'm really looking forward to learn more about what they actually can do and cannot do, and what you are really trying to change in the world, and especially the concept of citizen data scientist, I think is something that I really look forward to trying to elaborate more on.
Yes.
But before we go into that, it would be fun to just hear more. Who is Shaun McGirr? And how would you describe yourself?
Well, it's the company bio, and then there's the real.
Go for the real.
Who's the musician? Tell me.
Yeah, the musician.
There.
The musician. When I was 5 years old, I started playing the recorder. The generic flute thing. Yeah, the small one. Family. Neither of my parents played music, but family members did. And as parents do, they find things for their kids to do. So I started to play that, and then enjoyed it, and then gradually moved to the larger version of that, the clarinet. But still not very cool. And so once I realized I could probably get a guitar purchased for me, I got one of those, learned guitar, and then eventually found the cooler version of the clarinet, which is the saxophone. And that got me into jazz music as well. Huh? And so I faced a decision probably halfway through high school. Do I pursue music as a day-to-day living? Do I keep it as a hobby? I kept it as a hobby for a time. I have 2 guitars at home now. I don't play them very much. Occasionally for my.
You have a saxophone at home yet?
I haven't brought that over from New Zealand. Guitar you can pick up after any period of time and still play it, and saxophone can be a little embarrassing. Embouchure. Yeah, if you lose your embouchure. Not as critical on saxophone.
Which instrument did you master the furthest, in your own opinion?
That is a great question. I think in terms of being on stage and really feeling one with the music and all of that stuff, it would be guitar. Rocking out in a Battle of the Bands competition about 15 years ago, I guess. But maybe technically I got a little bit further in saxophone.
Because it's really, you need so many things. You need both how you play, also the ear. You need the embouchure, so you actually need to spend your hours in order to keep the embouchure, and then you need your you need your speed.
Yeah,
in your fingers.
Yeah.
For a non-musician like myself, what is an embouchure?
It's how you hold your mouth to play any given wind instrument.
Yeah, so if you take the example of saxophone, is one style.
You have to pull your bottom lip over your teeth.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I still have an imprint.
Yeah. And then if you play the trumpet, you have a different one. And actually the quality of the tone has a lot to do with the muscles you have developed in order to keep that, in order to control the window sort of.
Yeah, the airflow through.
The airflow is controlled with your mouth, and you need mastery of that airflow, and you need strength. And the higher the tone you play, you need to be able to make a smaller and smaller hole, so to speak, which means you need to be stronger and stronger and stronger in your lips. So you can have world-class trumpet players. For trumpet, this is very clear. And then you can have a couple of few guys who can go way higher because they simply has completely mastered this, which means when you play an instrument like trumpet that I played back in the day, or saxophone, as soon as you stop playing and you get sloppy embouchure, it sounds fucking shit.
And so I'm a little afraid. I didn't play saxophone for quite some time, and then when I left New Zealand,
you need to go to the gym, man.
In 2016, I played it again. I realized it's either me or the instrument. I took it to get repaired. It was still significantly me who was out of shape.
So when you start picking it up, you need to then brace yourself for, okay, I need my 1 hour a day, then for quite some time.
For a year. And that's a little bit intimidating.
So talk about mastery, right? You need to commit to training for a year to get back to it sounding decent again. And
I personally don't have, and one of the reasons not to go into music is that I don't have a hell of a talent for mastery. So I'm probably pretty good at getting to 50% in things, and then I can hunker down and get to 80%, and then the last 20% is a little boring, and that's probably contributed to my exit from academia.
Somewhere there, you need to be obsessed.
You need to be obsessed, and it's easy to get obsessed about something else in a neighboring...
Focused obsession.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Embouchure.
Embouchure, yeah.
Embouchure.
Yeah.
Embouchure is the right word. Is that a French word even?
Almost certainly. Certainly.
Yeah.
But you mentioned academia. You also had some academic career, right?
Briefly, yeah.
Can you elaborate?
So after leaving undergraduate university, I worked for a little bit for the statistics agency in New Zealand. It was kind of my introduction to data, the wonderful world of Excel and SAS and SPSS and all those great things, but also an introduction to how data can be created and how data quality is managed in those very important and expensive exercises. And then partway through my undergraduate studies, I realized I'm really interested in politics, in political science as a discipline. And then my last year of undergraduate study, I was trained by almost exclusively Americans or New Zealanders who got their PhDs from American universities. And so political science in the United States is a much more quantitative discipline. It's much closer to econ sociology. And that caught my interest as a way to collide these two things that I had never actually collided. So I convinced myself I want to be an academic professor. I want to be a political science professor for the rest of my life.
And so political science, what is it? Can we frame it in such a way?
Political science. So it is the application of the scientific method, as well as you can do that, to the political world. What is politics? Many different definitions. So, the bluntest one is who gets what, when, and why.
Policy.
Yeah, but a better definition that I think also speaks to why I think my training has been great for moving to data science is it's the study of how institutions and individual behavior collide.
Ooh.
So in society, we act as individuals within cultures, families, whatever, and institutions, both those that are in brick buildings, but also institutions that govern behavior, sets of rules, equilibria. Those are also
so even intrinsic values or cultural values that create institutional framings of minds in a certain culture.
Yeah. And it was just very interesting to me. I grew up in the 90s in New Zealand. There was a lot of political change, a lot of political change, culminating in a change of electoral system even in 1996.
Ooh, you had a change in electoral system in modern time. That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
How many countries have had that? Not that many.
Not that many without blood, without revolution and coups and all of that. And the particular topic I was actually most interested in as a political scientist when I went to the US, to Michigan, to do my PhD was the politics of science and technology policymaking.
Ooh.
Which connects back around
to what I
do now.
Now we can talk AI regulation.
Yeah, and at the time it was there was that big debate about the Microsoft Office document standard, and I became a massive secret and not so secret open data, open standards advocate. Quite religious. I wrote those papers for my undergraduate degree in OpenOffice. Damn it, in the right format.
You did not write it in Word.
But the fascinating thing was that the state of Massachusetts had caused this massive kerfuffle for Microsoft Corporation by using their purchasing power as a government organization to say, we're not going to use closed proprietary standards for publishing documents because that's not fair. And that kicked off a whole lot of changes, even within Microsoft. So I went to the US to study that, and I met with my supervisor soon after I got there, and he had a double PhD from Harvard in econ and political science. And he said, that's a really hard topic. And that's when I realized, okay,
So he had respect for the topic.
Yeah, but I also realized, oh goodness, I paid a lot of attention to mathematics in school, and then I didn't do any at university. And then I did a lot in graduate school again when it came to econometric statistics, game theory. But when he said that, I realized if he's saying that's a difficult topic and he's studied some pretty complicated things, I might need to look elsewhere for a topic within political science.
Why was it difficult in his mind? What did he point out as complexity here?
Because to make any progress on that, you have to have a deep understanding of both economics and political science. So in the end, one of my minors was economics, and I focused on development economics mostly. But I would have needed to go back and retrain at a pretty deep level in microeconomics in order to build formal models of firm and corporate and government behavior in order to make a contribution in that particular space.
Well, I understand. Yeah, makes sense. The policy making.
But mostly it was just him. Like, okay, if you say it's hard.
No, but when you think about it, the policy making in this space, technology, clearly intertwined with money and investment.
Exactly. So it's that endogeneity of causal loops.
Yes.
How do you isolate
which one causes what?
How do you isolate anything in that circumstance? And it was hit home. I had an internship after 1 year at grad school in Washington, DC. It was right after Obama was elected. And so officials and lobbyists who had been Democrats were in very short supply because for the whole Bush period, Republicans were much more useful. And so I was working at the National Academies of Science in the science technology policymaking part of the organization, and met with a lobbyist from a particular company. And they were particularly interested in immigration policy, US immigration policy, and they were interested in changing it. And they offered us their entire HR database so that we would study something and find an answer that influenced policy towards changing policy. Now, that change in policy would have been great for me or any other foreigner living in the States and who might want to stay in the US. And this was a company with a very significant HR database. And then that was a very interesting experience to be an intern in that room and have that kind of data offered up on a platter, as long as we found
the right answer.
Yeah, potentially.
Oh my God. Oh, interesting. Lobbying is an interesting topic in itself. That is a rabbit hole, by the way.
But you left academia then, or?
No, so I pivoted my topic and I got really fascinated by bureaucratic decision making and especially corruption.
What do you mean bureaucratic decision making?
So I had been a civil servant. I'd worked for the New Zealand government, and as a 21 or 22-year-old, I was working in the team that runs the New Zealand census, the 2006 census, I believe. It's the largest peacetime operation really in any country. So it employed 7,500 people to go and knock on doors and give out forms and then come back and take them. And I was responsible for pressing the button in the management system to generate a CSV file that went to payroll. And it contained bank account numbers and names and tax codes and amounts of money to pay these people. And I pressed the button and the CSV downloads after quite some time after triggering some query. And when I was studying bureaucrats and state capture and corruption and all these beautiful topics, I started to think, it would have been so easy for me to earn a little bit of money. I mean, I could have opened a bank account. I could have maybe even faked a name. I could have put some more money in that file for me. And it never even crossed my mind until much later when I was studying how other people stole from their government employers.
So you realized that there are so much going on here, and there's so many even unsafe practices, etc. And the way it's done, yes, there was that. There was what no one was watching me, or were they? And when I started to look at how political scientists, economists understand corruption, I started to realize that no one was watching me in that moment with that CSV. But I realized that the difference between a country with a corruption problem like that and one without is that it's not that the people are better or more moral necessarily.
It's that if I had put $100 in there for myself and it had been discovered, that would have been a career,
Ending.
a career-ending movement, not just a career-limiting move, but a criminal conviction.
Yeah.
If it had been $10, I would have been in serious trouble. And then you start to think later on, what would I need to steal in order to pay off the people who then process that file and then check that file, right. and then you start to realize that the and this is where having studied game theory as part of my PhD, realizing that the dynamics of that decision are such that the more you steal, the more likely it is you'll be noticed, and therefore you need to up in equilibrium the amount that you steal, and then you're more noticeable. So there's actually no amount of money, $1. If you stole $1, you could be fired for that if it was discovered, and the chances of detection are actually pretty high. And $1 is not enough to pay off anyone who's facing the exact same decision. And then it's the exact opposite in a country with a big corruption problem. And I happened to speak Russian at that time for a number of reasons. And it turns out it's good to study corruption in a country where there's plenty of it, because you can also find variation in corruption.
Did you come to any conclusion? Did you finish your PhD then?
I did. Took me a while, and I went through many iterations. And then the final question that I answered is the one that I started with, which is, why in the same country do different government agencies exhibit different levels of corruption? So there are lots of explanations of why is there more corruption in Russia than Sweden, or more corruption in Botswana than New Zealand, or why is there less corruption perhaps in Singapore, even if it's not a democracy or a full democracy or whatever. There hasn't been an alternation.
What's the answer?
And it comes down to that observation that I had about myself and why I didn't do those things. And so one of my supervisors in that process had written a book about the post-Soviet sort of collapse across Eastern Europe. And she explained why in different Eastern European countries, communist parties came back or didn't. And it was about the competitive environment that emerged amongst political parties for different reasons as communism sort of fell. And she coined the term robust competition. And when I thought through that, I thought about the core of that dilemma and why I didn't steal any money in that process was that it was not possible for me to collude with my colleagues who would check my work and do sums and lots of great things in Excel to check that nothing was untoward. So I kind of had this idea, well, collusion needs to be robust. If people are engaging in criminal activity, any movie, TV, criminals worry about the cops, but they really worry about each other most of all. And so being able to trust each other is kind of the, being able to trust someone with power over your future is really the core of all politics. But especially in a criminal organization, it has very high consequences. And so I used a publicly available data set of Russian public procurement purchases across 3 years, 8 million public procurement purchases, everything from paracetamol for a children's hospital in Siberia up to a multi-billion-dollar highway project. So it was good variation in agencies doing different kinds of things, but there was also variation in the things that they were buying. And a lot of conventional theory would have said that the more unique the thing that you're buying, the more the information advantage of the bureaucrat, and it's easier for them to steal. I kind of flipped that on its head and said that in order to engage in corruption, you need a chain of people who are paid off to look the other way. And it's easiest to do that when they're buying printers. Now, standard economic...
Why use printers as an example?
That was just
money printers, you mean?
Yeah.
No, printers, like Hewlett-Packard printers.
Yeah. And why is this...
So standard economic theory would say, well, there's lots of suppliers of printers, and so there's downward price pressure until some equilibrium price is reached, and maybe government pays a slight premium for something. The thing about printers is that it's very easy to discover how much the other people in your corruption scheme are screwing you over for. So when you get a budget to buy a certain amount of printers and you want to steal as much as you can from that budget, you need to find someone to overcharge you for printers. You need to find the highest price you can to create that wedge between the actual cost of the printer, that was budgeted and then what you end up paying. But you need to pay off your boss and your boss needs to pay off their boss.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, one of you dobs the other one in. You've been in Australia. You know what that means.
Dob
you in, mate.
I'll dob you in, mate.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And so when I looked across it wasn't the agencies that predominantly bought very unusual things that had the highest. They were corruption proxy measures. For, you know, if it just so happens that in a particular agency there's 3 bidders and then 2 of them drop out at the last moment over and over and over and over again, and there's also thresholds when there's a very unusual, actually in every country, there's a very unusual number of purchases that go through at exactly $99,000 when the threshold for increased procurement scrutiny is 100,000. So there's a bunch of proxies for corruption risk, and they're pretty well correlated with how generic is the thing that you're buying.
So more generic, which is actually way easier. But that's where it happens.
Yeah, that's where it's easy to get away with it. There might be less to steal, but you have to steal the money and get away with it to succeed in corruption.
Oh, super interesting.
Super interesting, yeah.
And in the process, I learned I don't want to be a political science professor.
So in the country where I was born, there is a number of these examples actually, but one of them was tool chargers, because here in Sweden you have the automatic ones, you're right. So you basically have a camera and then basically the charger. That's it. In most of these countries, at this time of time, in this point of time, was actually you needed to stop and give the money to a person, and then the person gives you a receipt for it, right? Mm-hmm. So exactly what you are saying. So it was like, and this was like they discovered them after some time, but many people made like a fortune out of that and moved to Switzerland or whatever it is. So they built new roads, especially after 2001 or something like that, when the roads were destroyed by the NATO armies. Mm-hmm. And NATO, of course, had to pay for it. So they make toolings, right? So you had to pay for 45 kilometers. You need to buy 2 tools. And you pay in cash and you get a receipt, right? So now everybody is in it, right? Because if I'm a driver, I want to pay less. Why should I pay $35 when I can pay 20? Mm-hmm. So I give you 20, you give me a fake receipt, right? And everybody's happy, right? And they know, the police know, the chief know, the person knows, everybody's happy. I paid 20, they split 20 together, right? So it's like a
victimless crime.
Yes, exactly. But and it goes on and goes on, and people say like, oh, well, people are corrupted. No, but basically you wanted to pay 20. So you accepted that as well. So, you know, in order for this corruption to work, there needs to be, exactly like you're saying, it's like more developed type of a thing rather than somebody just paying like something.
And you had a word for it.
It doesn't work for it.
Robustness of collusion, or collusion robustness.
Robust collusion. Yeah.
Robust collusion.
And it's fragile. When you're engaging this behavior, it's easy for it to break down. Not for any high-minded purpose, but people who are engaged in that behavior really don't like to feel that they're being cut out of the deal.
Wow.
Should we
move on?
End of story. We have the anecdote from
the anecdote proved the empirical evidence.
It is a good what is called like changeover to the topics that we're discussing today, because every single bit of this can be analyzed. If you open the book of all of these countries, I'm sure that you will find a lot of printers.
Yep.
I'm sure that you will find a lot of...
Why did they need to buy so many printers?
Well, people... we talk about this in after work.
But what was the switch then into the data scientist data space from political science?
Yeah, so it all culminated. I moved from Moscow back to New Zealand in 2013 to finish up my PhD in about 6 months. But being disconnected from my research site, being disconnected from my scholarly community, I said before about that 80-90% and then getting distracted by something else. Yeah, I lost some steam and some motivation. It manifested in looking for other permutations of that topic that, when I finally returned and finished the damn thing in 2016 and looked back to my prospectus that I had got approved in 2011, 2012, is like the same thing, which is good and humbling. I got back to New Zealand. I realized I got some postdoc offers, which would have forced me to finish faster than I was necessarily ready. But then I also looked at the amount of money that I would be paid in New York City. It's not very much. And so I started Googling data companies in Wellington, New Zealand, and I found one. And this is a story that you can appreciate having lived in that part of the world. I emailed some of them and said, hello, I think I know how to do some of the things that you claim to know to do. And here's my CV, and here's some of the things that I've done, and here's some code that I've written to deal with this nasty public procurement data. And we had a chat, and through that it emerged that I wasn't just someone who wrote some kind of stuntman kind of code. I actually understood where data comes from and how you use it. And the social science training, I think, is actually great for data science, which was becoming a very hot term in 2013, 2014. Because most data that data scientists are working with is found data, it's observational data, and therefore it's accidentally created in a way. So I sold myself into that job, initially part-time.
What companies was that?
It was called Optimal Business Intelligence.
Okay.
Very
OBI.
classic. Yeah, very classic mid 2010s consulting company name. And within a week, they sold me for a project, a 6-week project, to a government agency in New Zealand. One that collects money from people who haven't paid their fines. And I had 6 weeks to work out what was the bang for buck of the different ways that you can get money from people. You can send around a bailiff to knock on their door and say, we'll confiscate something. You can send them letters, and you can send them emails, and you can call them on the phone. And you can try and stop them leaving the country because it's an island. That's quite easy. And I turn up, and it's SAS Enterprise Guide 2005 edition, running on an Oracle data warehouse. I've done some bad things to data and with data, but I was not cut out for this. And so about 3 weeks into that, I realized I can't do data science. So I told the consulting coach, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to get an answer. He said, in consulting, you never don't deliver. You start having the conversation earlier and you change the scope, or you bargain for more time, or you say it's going to cost more money. But it was my first project, and I needed to prove myself. So I got some help from a colleague who was a bit more of a SAS expert, and helped me reason through some things. And the ML ops of that project, I don't know if that thing ran once and never again, or whether it's still running and no one knows whether or how to turn it off. But I can tell you that it's a bunch of SAS Enterprise Guide flowy things, basically glorified SQL execution. That version of SAS didn't have the kind of model that I wanted, so I had to export data onto a CSV, into a CSV, onto a laptop, fit a model in R. Put those that was sort of my native language for data.
You ran in R.
And not manually type. I think I automated those coefficients going back into thing, and that may have helped them change some investment decisions about how they got money back from people. But that was a 6 week. I learned a lot. I learned 90% of the practitioner challenges of actually doing that stuff in the real world.
So you got thrown out in the deep end, and basically in the normal sense, this is how it looks.
And in my PhD, it was just me. So it's just down to you. And I think a lot of people coming to data science still think that.
It's down to one. Yeah.
And there's no room for heroes anymore, really. Maybe there was, but now it's what we want to do is too complicated. Where we want to run things is too challenging.
No, but we've had this conversation, I think, with Josef a couple of episodes back. How can it be if you want to buy an e-commerce setup, you will go to a professional consultant. You will even buy a product. You will get something and implement that in such a way. When we kind of start on the data science journey, to some degree, this is a pattern in Sweden at least. It was very popular. We hire a master student coming out from university, and we let him sort out data science for us, the whole stack.
Yep.
which is sort of is ridiculous if when we start talking about the hidden technical depths of machine learning,
Especially when you do it the fourth or fifth time.
Yeah,
expecting a
and
different
it was
result.
like, wait, you're going to hire a student who sort of has done something theoretical but doesn't have any life experience, and you think that's going to be a good idea for data science, but you did not think that was a good idea for your e-commerce setup.
Yeah.
Isn't that strange? Have you had that? Because in Sweden, that was clearly a trend. That
It's still a...
we get some students in to experiment on this and see where it leads us.
Yeah.
Goes nowhere, of course.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not serious about it, if it is just playing and you've got spare money to burn, go ahead. And you want to write something in your annual report or post something on LinkedIn about how we're doing AI right now.
But I mean, I was sort of connecting back to this is a team play from hell. It's not a single person story to fix this.
And one of the reasons is when you dig really, 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 really deep, what is the total potential impact of what is done with data after the fact on a business versus the cost or upside of messing up that e-commerce. So as data people, I think we sometimes overestimate ourselves and the amount of leverage we have on the world for that final decision maker, the CFO, CEO. So the risk of not doing e-commerce right in 2023 or 2013, it's hard to think of what you could or what you would or would not do with data that would be so consequential in the short run. But we all know that in the long run, we need to change business models, blah, 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 blah. But the fact that it's less important right now means that we all accept at some level, I mean, I said it before, the data that we work with is accidentally created. That's kind of the poison pill, the original sin that we're all working with. And someone I know in the UK talks about it like this: until the energy required to create data is significantly lower than the energy required to consume it and make something of it, right? While it's so easy now to dump data out of any system into any format at any scale, it's so easy to create bad and difficult data to work with that then the cost that we have to bear as data people is unreasonably high. So if you think about it like an energy equation, that might explain why people make those investment decisions and why it's so hard and why the master's student is so tragically ill-equipped for dealing with the reality of what they confront.
So how do you fix that? And how can potentially Dataiku start to help people to resolve that kind of problem? Perhaps you can start by just giving some kind of example or describe, how did you get in contact with Dataiku and why did you get attracted to it?
I got in touch with them when I moved to London to become a real data scientist and to actually have that job title in 2016. That was also the trigger for finishing my PhD. Almost having a PhD was how I was getting these interviews. And then when I got an offer, that was that forced me, the forcing function to finish. So I land in London as the first data scientist, the lead data scientist in an automotive services company. And on the second day, I realized these people don't need data science yet. It was the master's student problem. Luckily, I had a lot of other experience in BI, data warehousing, data modeling, all those prior things as well. So we eventually sorted some stuff out, and then we got around to doing data science. And then at that point, there were lots of meetup groups, and people would reach out, and you would go and you would get...
What year is this approximately?
2016, 2017. Free beer, beer on tap at WeWorks, and who are these Dataiku people? And you go along, you listen to someone talk about the thing that they built, and it's like, okay, cool. And then you try and unsubscribe from the marketing emails that you get afterwards. Originally, when I had that job, there was a line item in the budget for like, Shaun, go and buy yourself and your team a nice data science tool. So I looked around briefly. I looked at Dataiku. I said to myself, at the time, given that we actually don't need to do data science yet, let's come back to that later. And then you might have been able to tell that this data product business that we were building, and it didn't go so well, so that budget got cut, but I still got to hire data scientists. And what I used to say to Dataiku salespeople at the time was, I wish I had the scaling problems that you solve. Right? I wish I had so much business demand on my expert data scientists that we couldn't keep up and build all the things. But my problem is actually
demand.
There are subsidiaries of this. Yeah. One, demand, we solve that in the end. You just go and talk to board members and like what's really on your mind. And then you'd build the thing that solve that problem and then say, actually, we can't pull that lever for these other reasons. But the other challenge was just fundamental data access. So this was a kind of a conglomerate. And there was super valuable data in some of the subsidiaries. And by the time I left 4 years later to join Dataiku, with one particular subsidiary, we were keeping count. It was the 8th time that we had tried to
get the same data,
acquire data from them, and we'd switch tactics. First, we went to them, we're the central data team and we're going to make money from your data. That didn't work the first 4 times we tried. Then we said, we're the central data team and our job is to empower you to use your data. And in the process, we'll get your data and we'll do other stuff with it. And there were some technical limitations, but really political, organizational limitations that meant giving us the data never got high enough up their development backlog. Refer previous comment about cost of dumping data. Yeah. And so we left never having got that super critical data that could have made the difference in the data products we were trying to build. What was the question? Okay. Yes.
Dataiku entry point.
The road to Dataiku.
Yeah.
So I went through, and then another interesting thing, this company was in automotive services. So it ran vehicle auctions and it had a logistics business and it had a finance arm. So it had all these different businesses and industries inside the business. It was a nice exposure to trying to solve lots of different problems in different contexts. So eventually my boss was invited to speak at a Dataiku meetup in a basement in Shoreditch somewhere in...
This is in New Zealand? Or?
In 2018. No, it's London now. She couldn't make it. She sent me along. And I it's funny. I wonder if it was recorded. I kind of took a massive swipe at data science platforms. Yeah.
So you got there and you were doing the
Dataiku
poppy.
I cut them off at the legs because I had achieved so much. And the Dataiku speaker following me last, because all those meetups, there's some other people and then.
He had a tough job then.
But I said some interesting things and I maybe looked like I was up for a bit of debate club or whatever. So I got invited to the Dataiku conference. It was called EGG at the time. No. I was at the meetup group. Then I was invited to appear in a film that they did called Data Science Pioneers. And I'm not a data science pioneer, but I was in a film called Data Science Pioneers. So what else do you need? And they filmed me again in Shoreditch in this apartment, maybe 6 weeks or less after my daughter was born. And because I had no sleep, I said some really interesting things, like things that happen 35% of the time happen all the time. Because I was sort of asked to defend why did political science, data science fail to predict the Trump victory, which was still topical.
So things that happen 35% of the time happens all the time.
Yeah, and I put that on Facebook. I was corrected by my main PhD supervisor, Shaun. Things that have been predicted to happen 35% turn out to have, but the rhetorical point, it's easier to communicate that point by saying all the time in the sense of often enough that you should think about what probability means. And then I got invited to their conference and I gave a talk, which I've rewatched recently, which was called What is to be Done When Everything Can Be Faked. It was at the birth of the deepfake revolution, adversarial AI, all that stuff that looks very old. And I just wanted to make the point to this audience of data scientists, predominantly at the time, that's who Dataiku was sort of selling to. So that's who was invited.
This is 2019?
That was 2019, yep. And so I showed the picture of, Lenin arriving in St. Petersburg and Trotsky by his side, and then the same picture without Trotsky, and then another one of Stalin with someone. And then we've been faking images for a long time. And the takeaway point was the most important things that we can learn about our data, we cannot learn from the data themselves. We need to learn them from context, from something else. You cannot tell whether a picture was faked by only looking at that picture. And And as most of my talks, half the people said, what the hell? I thought I was going to learn about automotive data science. But then they invited me back to the Amsterdam one, November 2019. I walked off that stage. They said, hey, one French guy, Roman's, introduced me to another French guy, Roman. Hey, we really like your British accent and the way you explain things. So do you want a job? I was supposed to join right when COVID was kicking off. So I joined a year later, which is now 2 years ago. And that was the path to Dataiku. But I have an interesting perspective not having been a customer. And so the way that I've learned about what the product does is by seeing what customers do.
So you've been courted by Dataiku, but you never actually picked it up and installed it in your company.
Yeah.
So what is Dataiku?
What is Dataiku? Take a sip. It takes. I know we've got a 4-hour deadline on this podcast. So let me say what it is not.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Dataiku is not a platform where any individual data scientist, citizen data scientist, data analyst, whatever, is going to build things alone. Right. So it's not really a cause anymore, but a manifestation of some of these pathologies of all of our data was just created by accident and we're hiring master students. A lot of that manifests in the one hero, one laptop, one thing solution that runs once or forever, but never in a sort of reliable state. So it's not a place where anyone builds anything alone, and that has advantages because you can ask people for help because it's a visual first platform that also offers coding. It means that there's a way to communicate across the skill barrier, right? So expert data scientists can help less expert data scientists, and it may be even vice versa, because the Dataiku flow and Dataiku did not invent boxes and lines, right? Lots of products have boxes and lines, including the SaaS product I was mentioning. Mm-hmm. But a flow is just a directed acyclic graph that has the nice property of going left to right. And once you take code out of the equation of having to explain what you're building, you force people to communicate what it is that they're building. So it's not a place where you can build in secret. Like if you're working on a proper secret project, yeah, you can lock that down. But conceptually, it's not a place for individual heroes to build stuff and never tell anyone what they did. So that's one thing that it's not. There's two other things that it's not. But hit me on that while I top this up.
I think it's a good explanation. I mean, normally, if you have to build some kind of data pipeline, you write some code for it, perhaps in a notebook or perhaps in some whatever kind of repository that you have. But Dataiku at least can also like visualize the data flow in a way that is very useful if you want to communicate it efficiently to more people than yourself, right?
Yes, and so that goes back to what I told Dataiku when I was fending off their salespeople. Mm. If no one's asking you, how did you create this thing? If they're just bowing down to it as some kind of magic, you're not under a lot of pressure. And so when we fail to convince people to go on the Dataiku journey, it's because if you don't feel that need to collaborate, communicate, to explain to someone beyond yourself, if your 50-person data science team is 50 individuals that happen to have the same manager, it's really hard to sell something that costs money to those people because they're actually quite happy the way they are. So it's not that. The second thing, it's not a platform where you should need to leave the platform to get anything done in the end-to-end data product lifecycle.
You're providing an end-to-end solution, you would say?
There's a couple of double negatives in there. So it's not a platform where you should need or feel forced to leave and go and do a part of that process elsewhere. But if you want to, you can and you should.
So what you're saying here is that you're trying to, what is the environment to put machine learning algorithms in production that you need as starting from a data scientist role? Mm-hmm. But then of course we are, I had this conversation. I had lunch with Mikael Hus today, by the way. So we talked about that. What type of data scientist are you? Are you a model guy? Are you an ML engineering guy or even a data engineering person? Because here now it's like, if I look at the whole flow.
And there's a view of data science that emanates from a particular coast of a particular country that unless you are a software engineer and a master communicator and a domain expert and you can do it all yourself.
Full stack engineer.
Yeah, full stack data scientist.
Yeah, full stack.
If you're not one of those, you're a worthless human being. So my podcast, which ran for a few seasons, was called Half Stack Data Scientist.
I love it.
Because if you have a number of half stack data scientists, so the data science team that I built was myself with the background that I've outlined, a software developer who realized that there were these interesting problems to solve. You know, he didn't want to build e-commerce websites for the rest of his life. So he was my co-host on the podcast, which started off as just recording our conversations so that we would remember them later. And then the other data scientists were people I created out of data analysts. So I've created what I would call data scientists out of people who were data analysts. And I've also failed to turn data analysts into data scientists, people who actually liked that and they wanted to stay that way. So in some companies, I had at a different meetup, I met a Facebook data scientist once in London in about 2018. I said, you must have so much data. How do you know what data you need and like where you're going to get it from? He said, we have a whole data engineering team and you just ping them on Slack and then they make it for you and they tell you what S3 buckets it's in. I just fell off the chair. I'm like, okay, we're in a different analog world, but even just the 1% of the 1%.
So back to the story that you don't need to leave the tool.
Yeah.
Well, how long is a piece of string in this conversation?
The piece of string goes to the boundaries of the enterprise. Right? So
but from if I go the data value chain from the a S3 bucket to the UX visualization for the end user in sales.
Yep.
Is it So
you can do it all in Dataiku.
So you could basically
natively. Yeah.
You could, because there's a lot of data wrangling and data production setting, containerization and yada.
It's all possible to do, but it may not be wise in your setting. So maybe everyone who wants to visualize the data that you're creating is already using Power BI or something. Yeah. Do you really want to force them to log into a different platform to look at your graphs or maps? Or you may need to live up to the CI/CD guidelines of your IT organization.
Yeah, and you have quite a lot of stuff done that is supposed to work even for. You have a robust data engineering, data backbone, data provisioning backbone, and then therefore you might use that.
Yeah, and then likewise, you may want to write code for a particular purpose, or you may want to free yourself from code. So there are data scientists. One of them told me this morning, this would really free me up from writing so much code. It's good for our product, and I think also good for data science.
I guess ChatGPT, right? And that
it was a real person saying it. I don't know. We can get onto that one too. But yeah, so everything is there should you need it. But what that really means in reality is that in different parts of even the same Dataiku customer, different teams in different domains will be using different sets of functionality based on what they're already using, what their constraints are. But because it's a place where you're not building alone, there are other people to ask for help who are outside your domain.
Let me start with perhaps a bit of a debate club kind of question.
Practice.
I have a couple of ones here where I can set up a debate between the two of you. This will be fun. But you can do one. I have a topic on this.
Good.
And one issue is then, I think, you are enabling citizen data scientists, and I think that's an awesome idea, and that's something that we should do. We haven't really defined it yet, but I think we'll get to it soon. Still, it enables people that perhaps are not interested in doing that much coding, but still wants to really, find the most value they can from the data that they do have. Mm-hmm. But let's say that they do find it. Let's say that they use Dataiku and they have these awesome visualizations. They train some models. They do the data flows, the data pipelines that they do have. And now they want to put it in production. Mm-hmm. What do you do? So then you suddenly potentially want to move to a set of software engineers that are not data scientists, and they do have a system. They do have some kind of whatever Kubernetes container-based kind of platform that they need to integrate this kind of solution into. Mm-hmm. What do you do then? How do you integrate potentially Dataiku into a productionized system?
Yeah. So the third thing that Dataiku is not is it's not a platform where you necessarily need to run things. So architecturally, a lot of our R&D cost, it's not spent on any fancy proprietary algorithms for super duper time series or anything magical. The visual stuff is scikit-learn or whatever under the hood for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
The cost that we pay as a company so that our customers don't need to pay it is the integration cost to the places data is going to come from, the places that the results need to go to, and the places that things will run. So Dataiku can run Kubernetes clusters for you if you actually need to do that.
That would be the proper way to, let's say that you find the awesome, let's take an example, some kind of predictive maintenance for some manufacturing system that they do have, and then they try out the Dataiku, they have some data, they find some kind of way to truly detect that now it's time to do some kind of maintenance on it, otherwise it will break down. Now they want to productionize it. What do? They actually do integrate data in queue.
They have a choice. So, this is why it's sometimes easier to say what we're not. So they have a choice, and it's all about giving them the right choice or the ability to make the choice, the right decision for their context. So for some models, it's click the deploy button and a bunch of important stuff happens that needs to be configured beforehand, and then the thing that you built goes between a set of Dataiku nodes that are just the same architecture but in different IT environments. Until they reach what we call the automation node, which might be running in IT's definition of production. And you can run a pretty high performance API out of that. But it might not be high performance enough to provide the recommendation engine of an e-commerce website with a lot of traffic. Then you have a different choice to make. Do you export it as a ML flow? But the software engineers don't know how to deal with that.
True. Right? Not ML flow.
What do you export? Do you export it as some Java thing? What do you export it at? Do you export it as, if it's something very linear, do you export it as a CSV of parameters? But the way we want our customers to work is to force themselves to have that conversation with their IT. So that's really hard.
So if the whole rhetorics by going into what Dataiku is not, is actually highlighting that for some people, we can use Dataiku as the low-code approach for the citizen data scientist. And basically, you get to a certain level, and it might be you can build the lightweight stuff, and you can do insights, you can do stuff, and then you hit sort of a glass ceiling somewhere. And then basically, we can use it as a medium heavyweight MLOps tool, end-to-end flow. So we can actually use this and put things in production. And you know what? You can have an API from the model straight out of Dataiku, and then push it straight out to your front end. And then next level, this is hardcore recommender systems in real time on massive scale for Amazon. So here we use Dataiku to have the environment where you have the validation and then now the deploy is basically we do something where we in the end deploy the model in some way outside in an even much more robust world, whatever that is.
Exactly.
So in a sense, we have three major angles to this story. Yes. It has the local data scientist, I guess, Peltarion storyline. We have the semi-robust MLOps flow internally, or we have the hardcore environment for the data scientists to work on their piece, and then we have a deploy, but we are serving it in the big boys setup.
And our bet is that there's actually not that many use cases in the third category, or there's not that many teams only working on things in the third category.
But it depends.
It's mostly 1 and 2 in the world today.
It depends a lot on industry and which type of company. If you're working with a digital data native company as your target group, or if you're working with an enterprise type of target group.
Exactly.
And it has a lot to do with, are you working energy on petabyte scale data? Are you working on time series real-time data? So it's very, very use case and company contextual, is this a platform company at core or not?
Yeah.
Because if it's a platform company at core, they don't need the full stack typically because they have it in different ways.
Yeah. So for Uber, for example, their ability to do this at scale is a differentiator of their entire business.
So, but Uber potentially could have a really good use case for using Dataiku, but they would not use Dataiku in the same way. They wouldn't use it for
Uber's finance department, for example. Yeah. So that there are people for whom Dataiku is their entire world, and they do everything in there. And there are other people for whom that is not true. And the other thing I like to say is that we are devoted to making workflows more efficient and new workflows possible between individuals and teams that might not otherwise happen. Workloads, heavy lifting computation is other people's business, whether it's a cloud, whether it's on-prem, whether it's edge, whatever. Workflows, workloads.
Workflow, very, very nice. Yeah. Can I? Is your strength?
You haven't really challenged me yet.
No.
Come on.
We will play nice.
Good.
Is your strength around what I would are vertical scaling or vertical integration? I mean, like we have the fundamental topic: how do I build a data AI value chain from both in terms of from idea to production, but actually from data to the user, vertical orchestrating for value. And then we have the horizontal scaling. How do I maximize harvest and reuse and scaling across teams?
Yeah.
Is Dataiku for the where is it? Where would you say is the killer? Both, or how do you see the value?
The killer app is when a company genuinely needs to do both. And the very painful part of our growth that we're going through is that not everyone yet realizes that you kind of need to do both. That if you really truly maximize speed to value in different verticals within your company, you may have built some things that would make other people go faster, especially the domains that are moving slower.
Yeah, and we had this conversation. Do you start central or decentralized? You need to, you need the value in decentralized, but at some point we all understand we need fundamental central capabilities in order not to both to harvest and reuse in order to have the data and algorithms shared, but equally not to reinventing the wheel and having 10 different setups of CI/CD as an example.
Yeah, and where we sometimes struggle is when we've traditionally started with the central teams, and they say things like, "We want to democratize data. We want other people to be citizen data scientists," whatever that means. And my new sort of acid test for those people is, can you name one of them? And then some of them fall silent, and it's just a thing that they've heard that they think that they need to say that they're doing.
So what's the problem here? When what's the pros and cons selling Dataiku to the central team and the domain teams?
The con is that very few central teams actually have the decision power that they might say that they do, or give off the vibe
from the business perspective.
From a business perspective, that maybe 5-10 years ago, when money was free, big data was cool, and I told you my boss put a line item in the budget when she set up that business unit. Buy yourself something nice. So the big data thing created a moment where central teams thought that they were P&L centers, but they were actually mostly turned out to be L centers. And most organizations that where we feel we can have the most impact are quite decentralized in some way. And so the most comfortable conversation with us is when it's with a central team that has some expertise, who's realized that one of the things they need to do is help other people go faster. But the enterprise architects are also on board with that idea. And there's also a lack of centralizing data warehousing types who think that first you need to get all the data in one place and make it perfect, and then we can do something interesting with it.
So you're speaking to me straight into federative type setups. That is the ideal.
Yeah.
That's when, and maybe we should explain federative in this way, but it's basically not all the power is sitting out in the business unit domains, and we have shadow IT from hell,
Yep.
and they don't talk to central
Yep.
IT. And the other part of the pendulum, not monolithic, centralized. We think we can rule the world from our ivory tower.
So
So
often-
somewhere where we're starting to collaborate and understanding the
Yeah.
different perspectives that we need to take together.
Yeah. But this entirety of this journey is actually too big for any one team or person to sort of conceive, manage, or even pay for. So we always need to choose, where do we go first? Where do we try to land? And often we land as shadow AI, shadow IT.
So this is an interesting topic. Where and I have the whole analogy on how ClickView was sold back in the day. I know it in detail. So have you been Dataiku? If you look carefully at how you have grown first of all with the central teams, or have you grown with the business teams, or however you want to? Well, I don't know how you define that, but
It was
departmental is the normal way we said
mostly
it before.
central teams, while the pendulum had swung back towards central teams, and they had budgets to do things to and for other people. But there was always a significant minority of Dataiku customers who were disgruntled domain P&L holding
Shadow.
independent decision maker customers of. The day I joined Dataiku, I talked to some salespeople. I said, when you talk to the people in the business, just ask them what kind of service they get from the central team, and then ask the central team what kind of service they think they provide to their internal customers, because that's the world I lived.
Yeah.
I had to make finance happy. I had to make sales happy. I had to make all these people happy, and you will find something, and you will find where the power lies. But if a federation is interesting, let me use my political science background. Crucial difference between a federation and a confederation.
This is good stuff. We use words that we don't really understand where they come from, and here we have a political science guy who can really nail it.
So I had another professor who wrote, there's a bit of a theme here, at University of Michigan in the 2010s, a book called Robust Federalism. So interesting. What makes a federation robust is that the center cannot take powers away from the units without them granting those powers to it.
Exactly.
So by that definition, India, which is by its own definition a federated state, is not a federation by that sort of
Definition.
definition, because the central government can unilaterally take powers from the constituent units.
So this is not a robust federation. In
So the reason robust federalism survives is that there is an equilibrium, a balance of power. No one gets exactly what they want, but they all get their second best kind of option, which is true of democracy as well.
I think this topic is extremely important and understanding for moving forward in any way when you have vertical and horizontal scaling going on. Me and Anders have had a conversation, and we were almost. I was using the word we need federative approaches, and I think Anders, you like to say we need hybrid approaches. Is coming slightly different. This is different semantics in a way, meaning that we need to work together, right? But I was not ever really sure if we really mean if hybrid and federative was synonymous or not.
One of my specialties is to find out when people use the same word but they actually disagree, or different words but they actually agree.
Because we're in the same neighborhood for sure, but I think there are
yes, you're in the same neighborhood.
But it's probably there are distinctions here that are maybe quite important. What
did you mean by hybrid?
I was, whenever I do kind of reasoning about, what is the best solution for whatever kind of problem, I try to first analyze the extreme use cases. So then in this case, the extreme use cases would be, should you go completely centralized? Should you go completely decentralized? And let's take a more concrete example in this case. A company that is not digitally native, they are getting started to try to find value from using data in different ways, but they haven't really got started yet. So okay, now the question is, how do you get started?
Yes.
And then how do you scale that journey up? How do you build more value going forward? So one solution could be that you do it decentralized completely. And that means you have teams that are building up their data usage capabilities in different ways. And each of the teams are embedded in different business units. They have an integrated kind of team setup with data engineers embedded with software engineers, business people, and whatever kind of manufacturing, finance, product kind of solution, feature, whatever. And that's one way to go. Another would be that you start in the other extreme and saying it's completely centralized, and then it's not connected to any kind of domain. It's not connected to any kind of direct value for the company. It's a centralized teams disconnected from the products and services that the company provides. And then you try to reason about, okay, pros and cons. And it's easy to see pros and cons with each, I would argue. And then you want to find a way, how do you get started and how do you scale up? In this case, I think it's easy to see that it's nice to get started in a decentralized way. To say that, okay, we have a team, let's say they are building some kind of machine, manufacturing something or whatnot, or it's finance, or it's some kind of digital service or e-commerce or whatnot. They hire some people that are data engineers, data scientists, or something that are Dataiku evangelists. and they get some value. And now they say, awesome, I want to scale this up. Now the big question becomes, what do you do to scale it up? I would argue, and please disagree, that it would be very dangerous to scale it up in the same way, saying, now let's take another team, completely disconnected from this one, and do the same thing. And then third time, and then fourth, fifth, 10 times.
Why dangerous?
Because everyone...
expensive, risky, but why dangerous?
Yes.
Maybe expensive, risky, or...
Maybe that's enough to be dangerous, but...
Dangerous and inefficient because they will all reinvent the wheel. They will not communicate with each other properly. They will have to do the same journey all over again every time. If they instead try to build up some more centralized unit that is trying to reuse and build up a more platform according to the team topology kind of thinking, that would be that they are starting to build up something that can be scaled, something that can be reused, something that can have the critical mass that the company needs to be able to do that without rebuilding the wheel every time. So then after that time, you can start to scale it up again in a more decentralized way, but only after you have a centralized hub, if you call it that, that the spokes or the decentralized teams can rely on. And then you get a true scaling happening very rapidly, I would argue. So that is the
I'm sorry, but I have to agree with you.
No, but no, and now
because you were very careful in your phrasing about when those decision points come, and that by starting with the extremes, you're trying to avoid the swinging of pendulum between the extremes. I think what we know from the political economy of economic growth, right, is that hold the phone, but in a well-functioning political system, it doesn't super matter which kind of crew is in charge. That the real problem is when there's big policy swings, left, right. Something Scandinavia mastered long ago.
No, and I think I always highlighted this. We are on the plane is not even flat. We are rolling a ball on a convex plane, and we are trying to have this avoid the ball from rolling off too extreme, decentralized and complete orphaned versus monolithic centralized. So here now we get to this, and here's now the conversation when we are now highlighting here that we have some things central and we have some through things decentralized. We are starting, in my opinion, to reinvent what has been the traditional IT supply, IT demand, traditional financial IT Tom. McKinsey being up and said you should set up your IT setup in this way, and everything with the tech label on it goes to IT and is an IT cost. And here we have now something else, right? We have embedded some stuff, and we're doing streamlined stuff close to the domain, and we're having central platform things going on serving the streamlined teams. And here now we have, this is not the traditional IT governance, IT architecture model that we lived with. I can see that. We are now investing in budget steering differently. And now we have come into, now we come back to what we are describing now. Mm-hmm. In what way is this a hybrid model? So one way of describing where you have both central and mm-hmm. domain oriented. We have used the word hybrid in some contexts, and I've been pushing to. I think it goes beyond that. I think it goes to what I would call now robust federalism, because I think robust federalism is the best definition. What I mean is not about.
I'll send you the book.
No, but because it's different to have. We are the central IT team, and we set up an architecture governance, and you can come and listen to us. But any time in the month, we can cut you. And then you go back and look at how Spotify did that. And, you know all about this, but I've heard this story a couple of times. Like, of course, we had standards, but it's much more on an equal footing.
Yes.
It was robust federalism. And for me now, when we say hybrid model, it highlights some parts of how we have both. When you use the word like federalism or robust federalism, you are going into dissecting the same phenomena, but more from the governing and policy and decision making.
Yeah, hybrid is just a non-committal superclass under which you need to get specific about what.
So how is hybrid? So federalism for me is a little bit like, okay, this is all hybrid, no problem.
Yeah, it's all hybrid. Yeah.
But now I'm going into, and how should we describe our governing or decision making or managing of decisions of how we do things together? And here I would then say, well, it's in this hybrid model, we choose to robust federalism as the model. Mm-hmm. Would that be? I'm actually trying to confirm which words is appropriate to use. I'm trying to find the right wordings here.
Yeah, it makes sense if you mentioned topology, and there's three of them, right? There's how the organization actually makes money.
Yeah.
There's how
that's the P&L we always talked about.
It's quite important.
Quite important.
And there's how IT is organized.
Yeah.
And then there's how the data people choose to organize themselves or be organized by some other principle, either by where the money is or by where IT is. What I heard in what you described is that what we would love is that we were all working in or for organizations where the data folks, the data capability was just a little bit behind an IT capability that was already moving closer to the business in some nice way. And then it would just be morph onto that typology and everything's good and rosy and great. But one of the words you said was that sometimes data people get ahead of where IT is. And I think where the danger is when data is swinging somewhere in that hybrid range, and IT is chosen to go the other way.
Yes.
And that crystallizes for me the most painful moments for Dataiku.
Yeah.
Is when, so I've had conversations where literally
good stuff.
Data and IT
it's not done.
Architect types are like, yeah, we're doing data mesh. Yeah, whatever. Have they read the book? And then in the same conversation, the same people can tell you, and our definition of what it means for a data product to be in production is that you ship your requirements to a central team who use 5 different sub-teams and 5 different tools, and then they tell you when that thing is ready, and then you can use it. And every use case is the same, and everything you do needs to be NASA technical readiness level 7.
This is bullshit all the way through, because this
so I think it's your question, the way you posed it, clarified that there's a choice to be made. Do you swing with the way IT is moving? Do you go against that? When I joined that team in 2016, IT, where I was still hyper centralized.
Yeah.
And the team I joined was a centralizing movement. It gathered up the flock of data analysts that were out in the business, in different sides of the business, doing the same stuff on the same data, generating slightly different answers. It pulled them together. It made a set of capability that would not have been possible to create. There would have been no mandate to hire data scientists and for me to be here if some analysts and engineers had not been brought together. And so we did some interesting things for a little while, and then we lost our connection with the business. And then I had the great idea, let's make my team business partners of domains. Hey, whoever, do you want to be the sales business partner for 1 quarter, but we're going to rotate you around. And so there's also the background condition of the level of scarcity of resources, I would say, and that's how we make it a bit more political. So there's how does the organization actually organized is important to map. What are the flows and currents of political power within IT? So we meet people like I described who are going data mesh, but by centralizing things like it's the 1980s. But we also meet people who say that they're doing that, but no one in the domains is ever going to listen to them. But when they talk, how do we know until we go and talk to everyone that, oh, that person's not actually powerful? On your question of federalism is not right for every country.
That's an interesting point. If you learn from the political sciences and from history, so we are describing a governing model which is federal, and you're now pointing out that it's not always the right choice.
When does federalism not work? Federalism doesn't work when one of the constituent entities is really dominant, because why would they agree to reduce their power relative to the others? Why would they submit themselves to the rule of the rest of the weaker entities?
But let's see now. How should I put this? Do we have federalism in Sweden? Because we have. I need to really think about this, because we have our statsminister, prime minister, and we have our government, and
22 regions, is it?
So you have the regions,
and then of course we have the stat och kommuns, state and municipality, and actually in many things we have our 22 regions, which is sort of, that was landstinget before, I don't know, but so we have different. I can't even sort this out in my head. How does Sweden work? I mean, like in US we have a clear federal setup with 50 states, right?
Yes. And that's the clear case because the 13 states that there were, came together and agreed on a particular framework for giving up certain powers, but all 13 of them had to agree to make that happen. And now to change that system requires supermajority of states or supermajority of their representatives. So,
but the point is,
you probably don't have it in Sweden.
No, but so sometimes we are starting to use this. This is great. We had this conversation. We're starting to use words. And this is especially interesting. You have a political science PhD. Democratizing data or AI. Is that a good word, or is that a really shitty word, by the way?
One of the. It's almost as bad as citizen.
Yeah, because we are taking now words that really mean something in a political point context
to me,
and we bastardize this completely to have shared and to deal with. But so this is very interesting. I would like to talk with you on do we really like data science? Citizen data scientists, is that a really good idea? Democratizing data and machine learning, is that a good word? And then now
federated governance and
federated governance a real thing. So words we now have bastardized and taken into a tech context without the sort of the political science PhD in the room to tell you what it really means.
I'm here.
Can we go here?
It's okay. Do we want to go there?
Sorry.
Do we have time?
I think we finished the federated part where we can move to data science, citizen data scientists, because that is the next step.
Let's go there. Federalism.
So close of federalism.
Yeah.
Close of federalism.
So federalism describes a state where the constituent entities, right, agree to give up a certain amount of power to some central body. And so, in the case of data mesh, for that to truly happen, you might need to be in a business like Spotify, where you don't have a physical product. As you described, every domain team has engineers. That's why I said it sounds expensive. And that, you were there. Did that happen? Was there a council? Was there a constitutional council of data? And one other note on data mesh is that data mesh is really about how software engineers generate data. Yeah. And they haven't paid any attention to it. It's just the data people who've gone off on a massive kick about it. But there needs to be a conscious collective decision by some entities to give up power and to not leave that system. And it's that bargain of we give up power and we agree never to leave the system. You can't secede from a federation. That's the difference with a confederation. You can leave a confederation. You cannot leave a federation. And what you get is you give up some power.
In order to have standardization.
To have standardization. So the classic example of benefits of federalism is the Interstate Commerce Act 1887, which said when commerce crosses state boundaries, it's federal rules that apply. And then in the 50s, the interstate highway system is a federal standard for what you can call an interstate road.
Yeah, and this is so you are giving up some levels of power for the value and benefit of seamlessness and interoperability.
And the difference is it's not some center granting you power for a time and then taking it back later when it feels like it. So that's the difference between federalism and other hybrids.
Yeah.
Next term, citizen or democracy.
So we're using it, but it's sort of interesting that you talk about this technology thing. Have you put that in place? Have you made those policy? Are you?
Yeah.
So as you said, who is on board on data mesh? How can you talk about data mesh from one team? You can't.
It just can't exist.
It can't exist.
It can't exist.
Okay, maybe stop. That was federalism and hybrid, and we moved into there. Okay. I think we should go into citizen data scientists. Okay. And I don't know if this is one angle to understand the words, but I think there are bigger topics because this is something also Dataiku talks about a lot.
Yeah, we talk about it because the market, aka Gartner, talks about it, and they came up with that word, and I think it arose in a time when there was this concept, citizen journalist, right? Do you remember that? Anyone can be a journalist now because of the internet. So the word citizen, right, has a very wide meaning. It implies everyone. I'm an immigrant. You're an immigrant. Maybe at one point your families were immigrants. Citizen already has that connotation. Who is a citizen? Who is not? What rights do they have? So a citizen is someone who has some rights and duties relative to some state. They give up some power. Common theme here. That's what politics is. Giving up the right to do things to get some kind of benefit in return. And so the first way in which citizen data science is troubling is that it does imply that data science is for everyone and right now. And the little bit of elitist left in me is that when we think about a whole organization, do we really want everyone in the organization to use AutoML? We probably don't. But the usefulness of that term is that it does provoke people to think outside the box and maybe break down what does it mean to be a data scientist, which we almost got onto the 4 professional standards for data people and consequences for doing things wrong. And the root problem is actually when I think about it, it's not so much citizen, it's data science, and that there's very little science in data science, and sometimes there's not much data. So what is data science even? It's an extremely ad hoc grouping of people who arrived, like myself, with a set of skills that we all agreed were similar enough that we rebranded ourselves as something, but actually my training is econometrics and statistics. And then I had to teach myself programming to turn that into machine learning. So I think differently about what it means to be a data scientist to a computer scientist, and to you, whatever you are.
I'm a business guy.
You're a business guy. So we're starting, citizen data science, we're starting with already a pretty woolly set of terms in the second and third word. And then we put a word on the front that overcooks what I think any of us really want to achieve right now. The usefulness of it is that it provokes a conversation about who outside the central team, who outside the self-identifying data scientists is actually already doing things like that or should already be doing things like that. It depends on the time of the day, how much I love it or hate it.
But I think it's interesting, how phrasing and terminology is important sometimes, and it all very often gets, I think, the wrong connotations. But I think the meaning still is useful. And I think I'm trying to get to the core meaning of what Dataiku is trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And one problem that I think we can easily see is that software engineers don't understand data science. We have business experts, domain experts that don't understand software engineering, nor data scientists or data science. In some way, we want to be able to empower people to do data science in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And in that way, you want to move it to a citizen, which I much agree with what you said, that this have a lot of, it's very similar to democratize data science.
Yeah, we'll get there. I've got
there.
even stronger feelings about that one. But,
but I think the core sentiment, I mean, the wording is one thing, terminology, blah, blah, but I think, you need to have a terminology, a language that people understand in some way. And, if it provokes some people, so be it. But still, I think the core problem that Dataiku is trying to solve is important.
Yes.
Right? And the core problems that if we try to define that properly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that, nor data software engineers nor business people, domain experts are able to do data science properly. So how can we enable both of those potentially to do that? Then, should Dataiku be able to enable software engineers to do programming and then learn to do data science and that? Yeah, perhaps, because you have a way to do that.
Yeah.
We haven't really spoken about the main features of Dataiku. I think we should have if you could give a list of the core features of Dataiku, I think it would be interesting. But I've used it quite a lot, and I think it's an awesome product, of course. And it can help software engineers to understand, how should you work with data in some way.
That's very interesting. We don't often hear that angle of actually how much better off would we all be if software engineers stepped a little bit into the data world. They might be more careful when they create data. What I've always found is when you're working with those downstream data, someone else's exhaust, sometimes there's very simple things that they can do upstream, like put a timestamp on things that are almost costless to them, but not something that they were ever told or asked to do, that basically cut out 90% of the work later.
So perhaps we need to move to the main feature, but just to give an example, and I'm putting words in your mouth now, but I know that, of course, you have a lot of features to try to help simply. Here are some potential dangers with the range of this specific field that we need to look out for. Yeah. I don't think that's something that the software engineer would even think about unless they get some kind of indicators of this is actually something you need to look out for when working with data, to have clean data with not missing values, with some proper distributions of them, etc.
So you mean statistical knowledge here or something? This is traditional data knowledge more than engineering knowledge that is important. Is that what you're trying to say?
Are you a software engineer, Anders?
Yes.
Yeah. You said that the way you reasoned through the organizational problem was to look at extreme cases. Is that consistent with what you just said about a software engineer has no idea of whether the range of data
No idea would be an extreme way of phrasing it. But, everyone can't know every type of competence.
Yeah, exactly.
They can be a super expert in how to program Java, front-end, back-end development, databases and whatnot. But how can they also be an expert in how to do data science?
Yeah, so I ran into this problem in this team I was in. And it's one of the ways I developed this power of working out when people use the same words, but they actually mean different things. It comes down to what is data. So I surveyed all of my colleagues. What is data? Tell me what it is in free text, and then tell me, and then here's some things that I think data might be, and choose the ones that you like. And I found that the people who were software engineers, they thought data was real. They thought
Always
data
real, yes.
was a physical substance, that the
truth.
ones and zeros are something, are They didn't say truth, but they just said, well, that's what it is. That's what the thing spat out. And then my data scientists, who I had trained and polluted, obviously, their brains, they were like, it's an ephemeral signal of an imperfect observation of a contingent and ever-changing world that may or may not tell us something about how things really work. And then everyone else fell on some continuum between data as a physical substance that can be melded through the application of software engineering, through to it's something that I found in a thing, and someone told me I could use it to measure the thing I'm trying to predict or understand. But I'm super skeptical about whether does any of that mean anything.
So, and here we can we say deterministic versus probabilistic view on the world or on the terminology here?
Probably yes. Yeah.
So here we have
a little reductive, but it's the first dimension of the.
So here we have a very
PCA.
deterministic. You know what you need, and you know how to build it. I can build products. I can build a process, and if I do A to B to D to D, then I can have a software engineered product like this. Here we have a bunch of data, and we have a hypothesis that it might have some predictive power that we might be able to use to recommend something. A lot of ifs and buts. It's a probabilistic setup the whole way through.
It's not that dangerous until the data science probabilistic people need to do things that will then become deterministic.
The tricky point here, someone pointed out to me, is when what is probabilistic in reality looks deterministic on the surface.
Yep.
So when you do a recommender system and it's all probabilistic, and now all of a sudden we build products that makes it look very scary real to something which is hardcore deterministic.
You actually have to put products on the website. You can't sort of say, well, maybe you could fade them in and out depending on the...
So the scary part, I mean, like ChatGPT. If you have a really good understanding for what it really is, you have a lot of value out of asking it questions, but you take nothing for face value because you want to collaborate your facts, you want to use it. What is dangerous is when you take ChatGPT with a deterministic mind, he's always knowing what he talks about, or she.
So after I ran that survey, I did an internal seminar where I said, look, we're having some problems building these products, and our customers are used car dealers, and they're going to eat us for breakfast if we don't get this right. And one of the things that I've noticed all of us doing is say, the data this, the data that. But when one of you says the data is anything to someone else, you're actually thinking of different things. So can we please do a little bit of debate club and understand each other's perspective? Otherwise, we're never going to get there. I convinced a few people to think a slightly different way.
But thinking is hard. It makes your brain hurt.
Thinking is hard. Changing what you've learned is hard. And data is not unimportant to software engineers. It's like it's one of the components of what they do. But the way they think about data and what it is for is very different to the way that downstream users of data. So I really like, Andres, that I don't hear that enough, that actually bringing software engineers, the more deterministic thinkers perhaps, into the data world and helping them understand the consequences of the sometimes quite easy decisions that they can make upstream might be a really good idea. Usually it's more about data scientists getting on the same page as data analysts, but it might be actually more powerful for us as a company to think about the actual, how to change the behavior of the upstream creators of the data.
Well, if you want to bring some kind of value for a company, if you think that the company do have some products, if you do think that the company do have software engineers, if you do think that that company potentially are having to put some product in production, and then necessarily they will need to have software engineers, then the question is really, who should you empower? Should you empower the software engineers? Should you empower the business people? Should you empower data scientists? I think, for one, data scientists doesn't need to be empowered. They are
powerful enough, maybe.
If they are proper data scientists, they don't need that kind of empowerment.
Yep.
What I do think that Dataiku potentially can, and again, please disagree if you want. What I think the Dataiku can really empower is to bring the power of data to software engineers and business people. Business people doesn't have the coding skills. Software engineer doesn't have the data science skills to understand, how to truly bring value from data.
And the reason I'm having such a strong reaction to that is that we only hear people say half of that story. So we probably don't push back hard enough on the other half of the story. But that does remind me that some of my favorite customer stories from Dataiku are when IT departments have used Dataiku to introspect. So there's one telecommunications customer that was kind of handcrafting in GCP some deep learning models to understand service failure prediction across their very complex IT estate, where there's all these different services that are connected to each other. And one of them degrading just a little bit can have this sort of cascading effect.
Perhaps we should need to, for people that don't know what Dataiku is, I mean, you spoke a bit about, of course, what the company Dataiku is, but perhaps not so much about the product itself. Can you, if you were to, I mean, the time is flying by very quickly now, but if
we have 5 hours, how many?
Of course. But if you still were to try to describe in as brief way as you can, what are the main features of Dataiku?
That's what I usually. You can probably tell that part of my job is to not answer this question, is to talk about the things you can do with it, because
I mean, you can choose to explain it in whatever way you want. So
people invariably come to it. Not many people come to Dataiku with absolutely no preconceptions.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like to start with what it is not, right?
Yeah.
To try and just shake a few things out of people's heads.
Good rhetorics of things.
Like a debate club could.
Yes.
In terms of what it is, core features, core capabilities.
We can rephrase the question if you want to, but...
No, I can answer the question straight up as well. So it's server-based. So it doesn't run... You can run it on your laptop as a server. But that's one of the ways in which you won't work alone, is that you're unlikely to run it on your laptop in any kind of anger.
But you can run it server-based cloud or server-based
any kind of server.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful for some things, but it also means you need to talk to IT. And that's why those IT people using Dataiku to understand IT are some of my favorite use cases, because usually IT is a blocker. They're trying to slow down our customers. Well, actually, have we ever thought about trying to make IT benefit from data, which is getting to your point. So it's server-based. It's very infrastructure agnostic. It was born when big data was a thing, but the cloud was not yet the thing. Right? So we've always had to support on-prem and clouds and different flavors of big data platforms, and we have customers running some very old versions of Hadoop that they wouldn't want me to name. So server-based, infrastructure agnostic, interface, it's a provider of interfaces to doing this kind of work that we're talking about, and a diversity of interfaces from...
So interfaces to be using a workbench for different types of user personas in the data science, ML, modern data stack, production value chain.
So we actually think about those personas, and that guides the product development. There's this nice payoff.
So who is your personas that you really pay attention to?
So one is the expert, or thinks of themselves as an expert data scientist who
could be in the central team and be being the
in the could be in any team. It's more important that they like to write code. They think that's really good. They have quite some technical skill, and a huge amount of those people are really difficult to get to use Dataiku because they want to build everything that Dataiku provides for them. They want to build it themselves.
Yeah, but what you're highlighting here is we can make them so much more productive if they don't need to build infra as code so much, but rather use their skill for the real cases.
But they need that business pressure to build more use cases, more value, and not to build infrastructure.
Exactly. So in a way, to really find that game is all about, well, when the demand and the portfolio completely outstrips the number of data scientists you have, then this starts to sort itself out.
Then we're in a lovely place because the expert data scientist will become more productive.
Because he just wants things. How can I now? I need to 10x my productivity.
Yeah. And then one of the things they might have time to do is to help some other people gain some of those skills. But when that data scientist goes out to those people, should they choose to do that, they won't be saying, you have to learn Python to be like me, or you have to work out how to run R in production. Here's something with a low entry barrier, and I'm going to help you to do that.
So here we now moving from the expert user persona to what do you call the next one?
Next one is a traditional modeler, which in a manufacturing company is the person who's maybe pretty good at MATLAB or Gurobi Solver, or when we say model to that person, they definitely have models. They're just not machine learning models. And they know how to code and they know what data is.
So basically the modelers who has the understanding of the data model, the relationships, or what is a modeler?
Yeah, very well developed domain knowledge, petrochemical engineer, knows exactly how rocks break apart or how oil behaves somewhere or how a factory works. And then one level sort of less technical than that is your business developer type person who is that was my start, right? Before I went off and got notions and further education, which was kind of someone who's learning enough to be dangerous.
Time is flying by here as well. It's already gone 2 hours, but can we perhaps speak a bit more about the future of Dataiku? I mean, I'm not sure. You probably can't speak exactly about upcoming releases and coming features, but still, can you explain a bit about the direction? Where is Dataiku going in coming years? Can you share something about that, perhaps?
What can I share? So that core belief that we need to integrate with the places that data is and where data workloads will run, we can never give up on that. Yeah. Otherwise, our product doesn't exist from an IT. If we fail to integrate with the things where...
Can I help you a bit here?
Yeah.
And I've been on the Dataiku story for a number of years in history, and I can see in the beginning, of course, it was more of a desktop kind of platform. It didn't really have cloud support. It is coming there more and more. Yep. It was very much in the beginning focused on the data preparation, data flow kind of parts in the beginning. Awesome visualizations, you can see that. It was a lot of like tabular data, kind of structured data kind of focus. It's been moving more into deep learning kind of areas. Yep. It wasn't really a lot into big data in the beginning, but it's been moving there, Spark support, etc. Mm-hmm. It was actually one of my main complaints back in the Spotify days why we didn't actually acquire data.
Lack of Spark support.
Yeah, but it has it now.
And we always get there in the end.
Yes. Yeah. But you can see, there's been a number of turns and movements where Dataiku is going, and it's capturing, I think, more and more of the needs of the future. There are so many things happening now. If we speak more AI based, and I'm going a bit more philosophical now and societal, and of course, with ChatGPT, which I'm super bored about talking about because everyone is asking about that and everyone is speaking about that, and media has a complete wrong view of what it really is. Still, there is a very strong trend into generative AI these days. Yep. And I'm not sure if Dataiku is moving in that direction, but if you think in that type of terms, what are the potential direction that Dataiku is missing today and potentially is moving into? And think about, big data has been one that you moved into, cloud has been one that you moved into, deep learning is another that you moved into. Are there some new kind of directions like that you are looking into potentially?
He knows, but he is now thinking, what can I say and not say?
I know less than it looks like I know, but I know slightly more than I could
talk about.
Say. So what I can say is we already integrate with prior versions of OpenAI products. So that's a potential direction. We have a lot of, when we didn't have as much visual image processing capability, we would say things like, punch out and use your Azure, AWS, whatever service to do that same thing. Ultimately, to take advantage of those things, those leading edge things that really a tiny handful of companies on this planet have the resources to train those things. We don't have the resources to do those things.
Not from scratch, but you can
not
use
from
a lot
scratch. And so a number of customers have for 3-4 years used even pre-trained image recognition detection models that at least help you distinguish cat, dog, boat, car as a starting point to then train a very specific application, one particular packaging on their products. When has the packaging been damaged, or when has the robot arm in that factory moved out of position? So not super sexy like flying drone kind of stuff, but really important for some downstream process. And so that will be a challenge as those things get more and more sophisticated, and that it won't be so easy to just say call that API or run that thing in Snowflake or send that thing to Databricks or do that thing in your cloud.
How do you, if you say Snowflake and Databricks, etc., are you considering them to be more of a partner or competition?
Depends on the day, depends on the customer, depends on the context. So there's a lot of confusion. A lot of people come to us and say, how are you different than Snowflake, Databricks, Alteryx, Data Robot, AWS, GCP, everything. How are you different than everything?
Yes.
That's one of the reasons I say, I start with here is what we are not. So you can rule out some things.
I love that. That's a good way to phrase it.
What was the question? Sorry.
So how do you consider what your competition is, or potentially your partners are?
Yeah. The truth is we can only survive and thrive and do the thing we want to do if they are partners, end of the day. Because Dataiku can run and manage Spark on Kubernetes, but it's a relatively niche use case. We would prefer that you already had a way of doing that. Be that in Snowflake, in Databricks, that things get pushed down because
it's not your core business.
It's not our core business. If we try to compete with them, it's crazy.
So this is quite interesting because you said in theory we could do it all, but actually in reality you're quite happy to have an environment where like Snowflake is doing what their core business is, and you are working very smoothly together with that.
Yeah, and when friction emerges, it's when any one of us, including ourselves, say things like "bring all the data together," or
I mean, it's almost I want to go here, Anders, even to have a little bit more, I'm not sure we're going to get a debate, but I think, I said it to you before the podcast, I think the industry and vendors in general, we are shooting ourselves in the foot when we are trying to sort of say the same thing. And I think, in the modern data stack world, if let's say like that, and we have already mentioned a couple of examples, and we can mention the rest, by the way, so we don't leave anyone out.
Yeah,
we tend to sort of speak beyond what we actually do. I mean, I think Snowflake is a great example. If you're a real techie, you have no problem. You understand, they are a data warehouse, and they grew up from that space, and they are good at SQL. Now, of course, they are growing and they're evolving their product, and of course, they have roadmaps. But in essence, they're one piece of the puzzle that they're solving really, really well. The problem becomes in the marketing context when I think it gets completely blurry by we are the platform for everything, and we are the, we are the platform for this and that.
That's why.
And everybody's the platform, by the way.
Yeah,
isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Everybody's the platform, and I'm the platform.
The platform of platforms.
Yeah, but my platform is the platform.
Yeah.
Is that helping? Now I'm
absolutely not.
But so you are part of this whole game here, right?
Yeah.
And I think you're doing it better than most, but I'm not sure it's good. What do you think about this? Is this a conversation you're having even maybe?
It's not good. One very, off-label, unofficial thing that I sometimes do in unrecorded contexts.
Yeah, now it's recorded, so it's a little bit worse. Okay. Be careful now.
Yeah, well, my slide isn't here. Yeah. So particularly when I'm trying to educate partners like a Deloitte or a Kaito in Finland or whoever.
Like a consultancy partner.
Consultancy partner. When I try to equip them on how to position, they have to fight this fight, but they don't know what I know. Mm-hmm. So what I do is I put up a table on a slide and I hide different columns. And the first thing is, here's Dataiku, Databricks, Alteryx, DataRobot. Here's the first thing you see on their website. And I point out that any of your customers and our customers would be forgiven for being confused that these things do similar things because it's something, democratize, accelerate, analytics, AI, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then I say, okay, let's dig deeper. What's behind that message? Where is the sweet spot? Where do they, and when I present this from a Dataiku perspective, it's sensitive because it's where do they beat us? When do we lose to them? Well, it's when the person who needs to achieve something really wants to achieve this or this or this or this. And each of those, I've used all of those products and they're all better than Dataiku at some specific things. And then I dig one level deeper and I simply ask, how do these things make money? And Databricks is consumption-based pricing. And we're often asked, why don't you have consumption-based pricing? Which is an interesting question. And Alteryx makes money, it made money and was successful by desktops, right? That's the way that it empowered people meant that the way it made money was by putting Alteryx on desktops. DataRobot was always much more tied to number of models, right, or amount of compute you were spending on models. And we're super old-fashioned in that we make money by charging per user.
So that's a business model
That's a business model. So the only way to dig through that hype, and this is the advice to all the architects scanning the market and everyone looking up Gartner reports and everything is, do that, be our guest. For us to play in the market, we have to abide by certain conventions and use certain words and try to fit in certain magic quadrants that we're in.
Yeah, which is, so we can discuss.
So you have to play the game. We
can really discuss.
But my advice to people looking...
this stupid game, by the way.
People looking into, is Dataiku the right kind of thing for me? They have to know who they are, if it's for me. Or if they're looking for that on behalf of other people, they actually need to know what those people are solving. We get into trouble when we listen to people tell us about the needs of other people and we don't go and talk to the people with the needs.
Exactly.
And then it's everything does everything.
If I understand correctly, you are personally also focusing a lot on the European and Middle East and African kind of market, mm-hmm. right? Are there any specific challenges or demands or anything specific about that market compared to others?
What are the big differences within this region?
Yeah.
Or similarities.
So I was really surprised when we created a parallel team in the Americas who worked a little bit independently and then we were brought into the same kind of structure. I was really surprised at how little we found that was actually different in the way that we worked.
Really?
Apart from obvious things like regulation, and we can talk about that. But you have lots of guests who know more about it.
It's not a small thing, but yeah,
small thing. No, we can recommend other people to talk about that. apart from some of those very public things, it all comes down to the different industrial bases and the ways of working and the ways of organizing. Everything we were talking about, who has the money, who has the decision power, all of that. So it's still much more common in the United States for a big central team that might view themselves as a platform team or a platform team with people or a people team that thinks they want a platform. It's much more common for them to have a large budget and to go to market to buy a lot of something all at one time. And so the biggest single initial kind of customers that we have tend to be in the United States because
the business, the money, the steering of budget looks
a bit more centralized.
More centralized.
More centralized and decision
power. Is this US or North America?
Canada as well.
Yeah.
And in Europe, glorious Europe, there are so many flavors of.
We talked about this. Flavors of decentralization.
Yeah, Swedish decentralization
is not the same as
German, Finnish, Danish, British, German, French, Spanish. So in Europe, we have to handle some very deep-rooted differences in corporate structure that you then cross those by industry, and you get a lot more cells in your research design.
But it's interesting. We had friends here who's from Solita, by the way, who we joked about the business and deal-making culture in Finland and Sweden, and where the anecdote is that the Finnish boss was in a meeting and knowing how to read a room, do we have a deal or not, and thought he read the room right in Sweden, and it's like, so we have a deal now, and the rest, no. We have started the consensus making discussion for the next 6 months, but then again, when that is done, we can run fast. In Finland, we made a deal now, but then and we will get the deal, but then we will argue for 6 months on what it was we bought.
That's a great anecdote.
But this is Finland, Sweden.
Yeah,
neighbors.
I was in Helsinki yesterday. But
is it true or what?
I've helped sell Dataiku to a large Swedish company, and it was eye-opening the level of consensus building that was
required.
That was required.
It's interesting, right? So it's so.
But
different.
the way you outlaid it, it's there's a whole bunch of things that need doing to get to value.
Yeah.
Sometimes the contract is signed sooner or later. Sometimes consensus is reached sooner or later. In some cultures, those things all happen on the same day, and in some they don't. And you just need to be mindful about which thread you're running. It's a bit more homogenous in the US.
Yeah,
corporate culture is a bit less industry specific, and there's the California, New York, and
but so an angle here now. When you want to set up IQ sales teams, is it more important to fundamentally understand the decision culture Sweden versus or is it, or has decision culture also something to do in which the banking decision industry culture blah 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 versus I guess public sector we all know is different, but can you find a decision culture of how you make deals, centralized, decentralized, that has something to do more with industry, or is it more about the Anglo-Saxon or Swedish?
It's even a
culture?
bit of a internal debate. As a political scientist, I would say first look to the country and the culture.
Yeah.
I would expect more similarity in how a Swedish bank and a Swedish fashion company make a decision
on software purchase.
Yes, on a software purchase. What they are going to use that to do is totally different, but what they're going to use it to do doesn't impinge so much on the decision process, and whether you're trying to convince a more central team or decentralized team, you're still going to, even if you go all the way out to the end of the spokes, you're still going to have to build consensus for a long time in Sweden. In any industry, at any level of scale, whether it's you're trying to sell 10 licenses, 100 or 1,000.
Is there any company that has more extreme decision process than Swedes? I don't know it. Because
not that I've seen.
It drives long sales cycles, unfortunately,
Yeah.
for us, and we need to explain ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. But when the consensus is reached,
It's
boy, can
Game
things
on.
go.
Game
And then that's
on.
whiplash for us. Of like, okay, we thought we'd have a breather, and then we'd go into implementation. No, it's now results are expected right now. So I've not seen one. I might have expected it in Germany, but not so much in Germany. There's sort of distributed hierarchy there. So you need to get to a consensus, but it's not everyone looks at each other around the room. No one is actually the leader, but they all have you all have some secret thing that you do that indicates when consensus has been reached. And it's for us outsiders to learn when that point is reached. It's a little more obvious in say Germany.
If we move to some more societal kind of questions, and we can also see that surprisingly large number of tech companies are downsizing these times.
Yep.
All from Amazon to Google to Spotify to whatever kind of company. Do you have any thoughts about that? Do you think that will be a coming trend, especially for more tech companies, that they will start to downsize more? Any reason about why is this happening?
It's important to understand which kind of roles are getting downsized typically. And it tends not to be the core sort of differentiating things. It tends to be ancillary functions, support functions, like my role. So I work in revenue and sales, but I don't have a specific quota, but I work in sales. So if Dataiku was struggling, I would be worried. But so would marketing colleagues and finance colleagues and all those who are helping the ship sort of go faster. And I think if we look at the big layoffs as a sort of overhang from the COVID times and the influx of cash to a lot of tech companies and a lot of questions that weren't asked by investors when they put that money in there, how long will this last? It's pretty natural. It's just a business cycle. It's just happening faster for technology companies, which they should expect because they're disruptors, right? So if you're a disruptor, why would you expect to be immune to the business cycle? And why would you expect the business cycle?
But don't you think that tech companies have reacted more extreme?
That is true. That is true. They are reacting like corporates of old.
Just take, Klarna or H&M or whatever. Many are downsizing in extreme right now.
Yeah, but come on. How can you talk about downsizing in extreme when someone has if I flip it, the stupidity to hyperscale and grow with hundreds of people that don't know what they need for 3 or 4 years? So is this just a backlash of an insanity in hyperscaling? I see.
I don't think it's insanity. So when you have crisis as a leader, what do you do?
No, that's what I mean. But the point is,
guard yourself against risks.
No,
so you deploy more. So it was like a calculated risk that you can actually hire more people in order to continue to establish business continuity. And now you don't need that. So it's time to clean. And so it's not stupidity rather than it's a calculated risk.
Yeah, okay. So wrong choice of word from me. But for me, it's if you know what, if you pay the high stakes game in recruitment, of course that pendulum when you need to clean up will be bigger. So I don't think they're overreacting either. I think it's just, if you have if you hire 10 people and you need to lay off 1%, that's or 10%, that is one person. If you hire 1,000 people,
you can also argue like this: they could have fired 100% of their skill or their workforce during the pandemic, when everything was going to shit. But they didn't. They upscaled, so that was positive. And now, when the things are going a little bit south, we are judging them. Is that correct to do?
No.
That's why I said business cycle.
It's a business cycle.
I fully agree.
It's just it's a little counter-cyclical, or maybe it's not.
I don't think it's strange at all, and I think it's fully expected. With this
But stupid. You said it's stupid.
No, you know what?
Debate club.
Okay, good. Rhetorically, I argued the stupidity was not in firing. The stupidity was maybe, did you grow too fast? The stupidity is I was not highlighting the stupidity in firing. Well, I think the stupidity was in how fast you recruited.
Yes, but if you want to really get a health check of a company, you just see how much their stock is going to fall, and how much the stock fell, even though they fired 10,000 people.
No, but
3 points.
I had
4 points. If I fire 150% of my people, I will probably fall with 70%. So it's a different thing. So it's just a cycle. So it's not something.
Yeah, but I don't have the full details. But what I know is what has been in media. And if I take one example like Spotify, and they went on an extreme hiring frenzy in the last 2 years. So they've had a really strong growth to some level. And then I think in the numbers, if I take it from 2021, somewhere in the end of, when we're slowly getting out of COVID or something like that, they on top of their 8,000 people, they stacked up 2,000 people in 6 months. Mm-hmm. Why did they do? I don't know the ins and outs of that, but so there's been some extreme things happening, both hiring sense. And so I think when I say stupid, I think that's completely the wrong word and really good rhetorics, bad rhetorics. But it's more like, there's been some pretty extreme moves aggressively.
The real test, speaking as a classically frequentist trained statistician who then had to learn how to be a Bayesian. Yeah. If you ran the universe again, would they do it differently knowing what they know? And Goran's point is that they might do the same thing.
Yeah, which is...
And my point was about why should they be immune to the business cycle, right? If you're being disruptive, if you're swallowing whole other industries,
you should be
you should expect you're more.
You should be more conscious about.
You should be more conscious of higher variance, right? If you're more unique and you're larger, statistically, you're in the scarier end of the distribution, and you should expect outsized effects. You will be the black swans. But I think they still would have done the same thing if we.
Yes, and keep in mind that the money is expensive these days. So that is it. And I don't believe that most of these companies, Microsoft, Google, Spotify, they could afford to keep these employees as well, right? If they want to. It's not going to hurt them that much. They're making billions already. So, but it's all about optimization. It's all about effectivization. And it was all about risk management during this time. And
it's all about Elon Musk as well.
Yes, exactly. But, so the topic of the day was citizen.
I thought we were going to get all the way through this 9-hour podcast without Elon Musk.
Yeah, exactly. No, but
he will sneak it in there.
Yeah, but the theme of the today, I was just writing to Anders, like, when is this coming? Mm-hmm. The theme of today was citizen data scientist. So I need to get at least 7 minutes that I can cut from these 2.5 hours. Okay. So what I would like to
also direct us now. Frame this.
Yes, exactly. So I think it's a very great segue from the last episode that we had with about reskilling and upskilling, and I think it's going to be it's great actually topic to discuss. So we frame basically what Dataiku is, what you are supplying as a product, and what are you supporting. We talked about federated governance, federated learning, etc. And we spoke a little bit about citizen data scientists. So in the next 7 minutes, it would be great just to do the frame. What is citizen data scientist? For which company is it? How can we get citizen data scientists? What does it mean to have citizen data scientists in an organization? How many citizen data scientists you need to have to call yourself data-driven? And that will be it. If you can do this
7
in 7 minutes, I think it will be great. Do 20 if you want, but just give me something to cut.
We actually have it to talk about. Okay, please. Let's do it again.
But if you really want to open up Pandora's box,
No.
I can just bash the whole setup.
The questions are posed.
Let's do it.
Let's do
You
it.
wrote them down, Andres?
The question is written down, yes. So please, what is a citizen data scientist?
Okay, always safe to start with dictionary definition. So the way Gartner defined it is someone doing data science. It's an interesting phrasing, for whom statistics and something is not part of their core job description. And actually, apart from the word citizen, that's a perfectly
You don't
fine.
like it, right? So
So if we can simplify it, what does it mean?
we don't use the word citizen nor democratize, right? So what is the other word then?
So my colleague, Doug Bryan in the US, wrote an article the other week, which I loved. He said, long tail data scientists.
I read this article even.
So they are people applying the techniques of data science, which is a little bit of programming to scale some things, a little bit of math and statistics so you don't destroy the world, and most importantly, domain knowledge. But you're doing that outside a central team working on the biggest, hairiest, craziest, scariest use cases and walking around with superhero capes on and data scientist badges. So you're working in the long tail of use cases.
So can we call them a business domain owners?
Owner can mean lots of things.
Okay, but
the key thing is they are doers.
Yes,
They
business
are
domain
doing.
experts. Let's go, something like that.
Experts in what? But they're in a business domain and they are creating some kind of data product. And what differentiates them from someone
What
doing
is a data
dashboard-
product in this context?
from a data product has some inputs and it has a customer of that product who has some expectations about reliability, right? So it's not a dashboard that you dump. It's not a.
I mean, it's very
spreadsheet
similar
that
to
you
the
email.
Convey Venn diagram of
that's what was in
what
my
a data
head.
scientist is.
Yeah.
It's someone with programming skills, someone with math skills, someone with domain expertise, and it's. I think it's a very classical kind of definition, which
And
is
the,
nice.
the important thing that Dataiku does is to augment the programming skills of people
Yes.
who don't have so many of those.
Because I think, that is really what also I was trying to say a bit before, because we have people that want to be data scientists that may have some programming skills. They may have some math skills. They may have some domain expertise skills, but not enough. They're not super experts in any of them. And this is kind of what's the proper term here? A person that is more of a generalist, but they really want to find the proper value for using data in some way.
Yes.
If they can find the proper tool to help them to do not the extreme programming, not the extreme math,
Yes.
not the extreme domain
Yeah.
expertise, but still provide value.
Right? Can we dumbify this? Can we exemplify? Can be a nurse a great what is called candidate for becoming
A nurse in a hospital.
Yes, or a sales manager in a company.
A nursing shift manager, I would say, yes.
Right, because they have some
A
administrative.
boss of nurses.
But
Right.
to me,
The sales director, though.
Yes.
But listen, I have a real problem with this conversation because I think, for me, I work with these topics since 2012 in very traditional companies who has a traditional IT setup, and I work with technology and business intelligence, advanced analytics, never ever being employed by IT. And never ever having a budget, having an IT budget and all that, but building tech teams in there. So I think when we use the word citizen data scientist, it's very, very confusing because either we are talking about any role. That means you're a nurse or you have your normal day job, and then we are basically giving these people tools tools to augment their work with data and AI. Okay, that means your normal user persona business role is augmented with technology. Mm-hmm. Okay, then we take one step back and say we need people who are building models or building something, creating. I'm not a consumer anymore, I'm a creator of something. Mm-hmm. And now we have the topic, well, I hate the central setup completely. I don't buy it. I live by domain-driven design. I live by team topologies. So everybody to me is either working in central platform teams, creating value in that sense, mm-hmm. or you're working streamlined, creating value in that sense. And for me now, I can realize that we have people now that we have domains who don't have as deep technical skills, or maybe you need a lot more mm-hmm. deep technical skills to build this self-service setup for the many. But for me, then the whole citizen data scientist game just died, because that's just a streamlined team of whatever we are needing to do in the decentralized
I'd honestly
world.
love if we found a different term of convenience, and if it just meant exactly what you said, which is there are people doing their job. Some of them need new capabilities to answer new kinds of questions, interrogate data, build something more useful. And they just continue their job title, and they just have this as a sort of superpower. We don't need to relabel them.
Or we have cross-disciplinary teams.
Yep.
So we have a data scientist expert. I don't know what deep level you need to be on, but he's embedded. So I don't really get the whole citizen data. I mean, like, I'm really don't like it.
So great. Okay.
So that's why we didn't go deep.
Yes, exactly.
So now we go there.
So now you come down.
Yeah.
So we had two things that, and thank you for that. That was good, because you started making the definition by Gartner, which is basically some kind of a data scientist without having any knowledge in statistics, analytics, and etc. Right? And then we defined that basically every domain, let's call them, we will not call it a citizen data scientist or something. We call it like a person that is working in a domain specific area mm-hmm. that can be amplified with deploying or learning data and AI. I like the term citizen data scientist because it gives you a perspective where we need to be, right? It's the most ideal thing to think when you are saying like, okay, in the end of the road, every single person in this organization will need to have data analytics skill sets. They maybe will be called data science officers or citizen data scientists, or I don't know, call them gurus or whatever you want to say. But the ideology of you becoming data driven, and it's equal to how many citizen data scientists you have, or how many data literate people, analytics literate people you have in the domain corners. I think it makes sense.
But there is one topic that I really don't understand that needs to be clarified for me. Are we meaning consumers or are we meaning producers?
For me, it's producers.
Okay, explain the difference between consumers and producers.
Because everybody clearly needs to be able to consume AI data.
Yeah.
And
that's where citizen is maybe a better word, because it is closer to everyone.
Because a consumer, we augment and nurse. And now it's also about, she should not be needed to be proficient. We need a better UX. We need a better experience so she can consume recommendations like ChatGPT on the fly. So this is consumption. So when you use data scientist and citizen data scientist, it implies to me that someone further out is building models that is put in production.
Yeah, and that's
that for others to consume. So a citizen data scientist is not a citizen data scientist if he doesn't build models and put them in production for others to consume.
Yes, they must build a product and they must have consumers. So thinking about the nurse using that decision system or whatever.
And
it is.
here is where the whole thing falls apart, because when I look at these different definitions, it's very blurry if it's a consumption role or if it's a production role.
Right. Yep.
And when I follow domain-driven design, I follow team topologies, I follow data mesh. We're talking about platform-aligned teams, and we talk about stream-aligned teams. So stream-aligned teams, you sit all the way out in the business and doing something for core business. And now I need to have real domain expertise, and I'm building something. And by the way, I will hire someone who can build a model. Okay. How technical does it need to be? The reality is, when you really build value stream teams all of the company, you will not find enough talent for the super duper hardcore guys that you find in the ivory tower. So I will use these guys to build tools and UX. So I will then do a little bit less, they will be models, but I don't trust these guys to deploy a model. So we will have tools so they can do that.
Exactly.
And now we have the stream-aligned data scientist, and we have this type of role spread widely.
Yep. So I think stream-aligned data scientist is,
and it doesn't mean everything. It doesn't mean everyone is a
not everyone is a producer. No,
a producer. It means within a team you have a producer.
Yes, exactly. And that person who is some kind of nexus for that team, right? Who becomes that. Those are classic early adopters of Dataiku out in the domains, out in the long tail, wherever. It's the person who has become, intentionally, unintentionally, the data guru. So people come to them with questions.
Yep.
This is how I started. Yep. And then they try to answer those questions with the tools that are available. And Dataiku's role in that is to augment that person so they can build better products that augment other people. But the person consuming it shouldn't need to ever know that it came from Dataiku. That's not relevant to the consumer. So
let me take a real world example. When we introduced Power BI in Vattenfall, this is in 2015, really early, by the way, for Power BI. We had an idea of 80-20 rules that we will have 20% will be super users. We will give them the Power BI desktop. That means that they can actually take the data and ad hoc create a new report in Power BI, and 80% will be consumers. They will get to Power BI online, and they will consume ready-made dashboards that you can drill down again. In reality, we ended up with 70-30 or 60-40. So we had the super user community was a lot larger than we thought.
Okay,
so this was really cool, right? Yeah. This was the business controller community who liked to do the pivot tables, who picked this up. And we were smart how we did it.
And that's good for us.
And this, to me, the super user Power BI is the equivalent of, the citizen data scientist in Dataiku.
Whenever a company comes to us and says, we want to build a citizen data science capability program, whatever, we ask, what's that split amongst your Power BI, whatever?
Exactly.
Who are amongst the 20 or 30 or 40, who are the people rattling the cages?
Yeah. So when we say citizen data scientist, in Vattenfall, we were thinking we use the word super users, right?
That's exactly where we help people go and fish for Dataiku users. They're the people who've already moved themselves as an individual far enough along some kind of maturity curve as an individual, and has become a focal point. They don't know that they're a creator of data products, but as soon as people depend on them to run some report on a Tuesday, blah, blah, blah. And when you give them something that allows them to provide a better service, a better product to the people in their domain, and then use the time that they save to start investigating more and more.
So now this conversation starts making sense to me again. Because I had these words and I had the Gartner definition,
It's too broad. It's too broad. Yeah, it's too broad.
It's not concrete, so you can understand who we are talking about.
And that's so it took us 3 hours. But in a more sales conversation at Dataiku, that's why I ask people who say that they want to create these people, or God forbid they say they want to democratize something and they don't know they're talking to a trained political scientist. Tell me, name one. Exactly. Name one person. If that person hasn't been out into the domain, to the coalface, to the ward with the nursing manager, and they say they want to democratize something to them, I don't believe you. I'm going to go and find that person, talk to them myself.
And typically, have you installed Power BI or Tableau? Yes. Do you have any super users out there who can produce reports today? Okay. Now we're getting somewhere to start touching it, right? Yeah. And if you don't have super users out there who are allowed to ad hoc,
no one is asking more sophisticated questions, it's going to be tough to sell any flavor of data science
out there for them to start building FTs into this. Yeah. Sorry for hijacking this. I'm really sorry.
No, I appreciate it. Now, if you could just find the one word we put in front of data scientist or my
domain data scientist.
Yeah. Interestingly, when I spoke at the Dataiku conference in London in 2019, I was on stage with other people who'd appeared in this documentary. And one of them said that one day there will be such a thing as domain data scientists. And in 2019, I was like, we'll never get there.
Oh, with data mesh and domain-driven design.
Now we think it might be possible.
I think domain data scientist says a hell of a lot more than citizen data scientist, to be honest.
Yes. Yeah. And to me, it's less about the skill level of the people, but it's because data scientists became a badge of honor and a differentiator and an ego boost. That's why then people wanted to put stuff on the front of it.
It's actually extremely interesting because in different domains you will have different types of data. Is it more time series related data?
Exactly.
More customer data?
You might need to specialize.
What type of models and what type of algorithms is relevant when it's a heavy duty machinery IoT?
You can't know.
So a domain data scientist with a speciality in the algorithms and models and types of data, for an IoT physical asset versus customer versus banking.
We solved it.
Awesome. We came to a conclusion.
Domain data scientist. I like it. And then there's just different, green belt, black belt, different levels of whatever there. And then if you have those, you can move them around to a related domain, right? And they might bring other domain expertise, but help build a horizontal thing.
Yeah.
It's a different podcast.
And then you can have your platform data scientist in relation to...
And you can then graduate once you've been around enough domains. Now you've seen enough domain-specific problems, you can abstract away and contribute platform capabilities.
Why not?
Awesome. Shaun, we've spent 2 hours and 45 minutes already. I think it's high time that we try to close this podcast. Shaun, what's next in your life? What's happening privately, professionally? Any upcoming plans that you have?
I'm going to Japan for 3 weeks at the end of March. Spent 4 or 5 days there. New Year's 2015, 2016. Right before I realized I want to move overseas. We want to move overseas again. And in 4 days, 5 days.
To Japan as well? Or?
No, just not yet. Yeah. But it made such an impression in 4 or 5 days. And then we wanted to go back in 2020, in 2021, 2022. 2023 is
the allure of Japan.
Big part of it is just train nerdery.
Train what?
Nerdery, geekery.
No, geekery. Oh, cool.
So just trains, and my daughter's pretty into trains as well. She's 4.
They have trains that actually arrive on time.
I know.
So you're going to go on the what's the
Shinkansen?
Shinkansen. What's the nickname for it? It's called the. Isn't it like a animal name? I don't know. It has a nickname.
Every single one of them on different branches has a particular animal
like
or spirit.
Okay.
Yeah, and I learned Japanese for 3 years in high school. And,
you did?
And got quite good and then forgot it all because I never used it.
How many languages do you know? Russian, Japanese?
No, I don't know Japanese anymore.
Oh, okay.
But it did reduce the entry barrier to learning the Cyrillic alphabet because, I learned 2 Japanese alphabets and a little bit of a third one, so nothing freaks me out. So that's looking forward to that. Looking forward to spending some more time in your part of the world. Actually, we'll talk about that after work. Professionally, I think I will listen back to this podcast and try to bottom out the Dataiku answer to some of these things. This has been an interesting challenge that has validated some of the ways that I already talk about what Dataiku does, but also challenged me on some ways that I can
in a positive way
improve that. Absolutely.
We failed, I think, a bit in properly having a debate club here, though.
On stage, Data Innovation Summit. He's the organizer. You're the chair. Make me argue anything, and I'll
you
try.
need to keep me out of it because I get too passionate, and I don't give a fuck about.
But would you get
debating.
passionate?
I'm just pushing my
Would
message.
you get passionate about non-domain oriented design? That's what.
Right. So, by the way, data innovation happens on Thursday. So that means that we have a podcast that day. It will be a crazy one. We don't have to have one guest. We can have 15 minutes, one guest out.
Maybe
a
that's
new
the
one.
point. Debate club in AI innovation.
Debate battles, 15 minutes, specific topic, in and out. We do 2 hours. We have 12 people.
And you're the moderator.
I think I'd be a good moderator.
Okay, so we run a debate club, AI after work, live on stage in the middle of the whole conference.
Yes.
So imagine like we have this in a glass.
It's already too good a conference.
It's a cage. You get your death match.
So keep in mind that we have the data octagon there. That was basically it was imagined to be a debate because we have all the partners, we have the Snowflakes and the Databricks sitting on a one panel discussing data management, etc. But
we have to play nice because
in the right corner we have Shaun McGirr.
But we can do something for the as soon as the conference ends. I think it ends allowed.
And I think maybe practitioners only.
There was an idea that came from Peter Johnson that we actually should have on the podcast one day, and I promised Peter I will invite you to do basically data visualization battles. Doesn't matter which toolkit you do. Yeah. We basically just do the best visualization of a particular data set and etc. And it will be nice because people can use different type of tools and they can derive insights in different ways. And
two kinds of battle.
Yes, so it will be cool. Robert Luciani had an idea about it was called code katas. So basically, people need to in 2 minutes to produce a code. While
they're racing ChatGPT.
Yeah, exactly. While they're drinking shots. So
start with my debate club and then go.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see.
Shaun, anyone that you would recommend to come on this podcast? Someone that you would love us to interrogate for you to listen to?
Drew Conway. If you can find whoever at Gartner came up with citizen data science.
Is he still alive? Or
he must be. A guest who previously, I think, turned you down. A guy called Martin Johansson. Or did you turn him down?
Martin Johansson.
Oh, who are we talking about here? I'm not catching.
Formerly of Ericsson. I had a big joke with him today. He said, "Oh, you're on the podcast." He said, he either refused to come on this podcast or you refused to have him.
No,
sure.
I'm not
sure.
Can
you feel the tension building?
I don't. I'm not sure.
I don't feel anything. That's the problem. I don't think you know who it is.
But if it's true,
Johansson.
All right. Okay. Let's see that Johansson, Ericsson, right?
He's now at Catella.
Okay, I know him.
So he is someone really trying to.
It might be the case.
I'm not sure. I haven't invited. I
don't think we've invited him, but we should have done. That's awesome.
That's cool.
Great suggestion.
Catella is not an early adopter of AI.
Okay.
And so it's very analog.
Yeah.
And his challenge is, it's not a legacy challenge because there's no legacy. So Henrik, you get your teeth into that one.
What would be your...
No, we are just connected. You see, so like, hey, Goran, like, hey. But...
Thanks, Martin. I hope you're well. I've actually been using that feature on LinkedIn for quite some time. Yeah, it's very appropriate for most LinkedIn interactions. It's a well-matched...
It really speed up.
It speeds things up. Yeah. You get through the pleasantries faster.
Shaun McGirr, it's been a true pleasure to have you here, and I hope we can continue for some time afterwards as well with the after work, and I'm certainly looking forward to that. So it's been a true pleasure. Thank you very much for coming here.